Oh, Selena, look how handsome John is, Betty told her friend. She was 6 months pregnant herself. Spit, her friend looked at her. Laughed Beatty. That's good. The girl lifted her son in her arms and kissed him. You're so superstitious. Betty always knew that. God protects him, Selena said. They had been friends since high school, and now that they had both graduated and married, one was already a mother and the other was just getting ready. Where are they? Betty looked at her watch. I don't know, they should be here by now, she shrugged. Today was their special day. It was on this date that Betty and Selena had met their husbands. Yes, Harry and Carlos were friends. They'd been walking the streets of the city like girls, and apparently, as fate would have it, they'd met two friends. Since then, exactly 5 years had passed. They played weddings 1 month apart. At first, they wanted it to be on the same day, but then the girls changed their minds. And today they gathered to celebrate a small anniversary of their acquaintance, waiting only for their husbands. Are they knocking? Betty looked at her friend when she heard a sound. I don't know, go look. Carlos has keys. She looked toward the front door. Betty got up and went to open it. Indeed, there were young men standing on the landing with so many bags in their hands that they couldn't even knock properly. Wow, Harry, she can feel you even through the doors. Carlos looked at his friend. Come on, we were just scraping by. They entered the apartment. Where are you going? The girls looked at the huge bags. Now we'll get everything ready and sit at the table. Her husband did not answer her question. And he and Carlos really went into the kitchen, closed the doors, told the wives to wait a little. They looked at each other and quietly went into the room. That's the way it always was. Betty and Selena were very good guys. They were always in charge. The wives just had to be there for them and love them. Well, that was it. An hour later, Harry came out of the kitchen. He and his friend had dragged a large table to the middle of the room and began carrying the dishes they had just prepared themselves onto it. Boys, did you really do all this yourselves? Betty marveled at it every time. Enough already, her husband kissed her on the cheek. They sat down at the table. Everything looked delicious. Carlos poured wine into glasses. We thought of you too. The young man smiled and pulled another bottle from under the table. You what? I'm nursing and Beatty's pregnant, Selena told him immediately. It's non-alcoholic, hubby parried. Good, then let's have it. She set up 2 glasses. It was so family-friendly, the friends sat around, reminiscing about everything they had, how they met, what they talked about, and the rest. I feel sick. Betty covered her mouth with the palm of her hand. Hurry up, Harry took her hand. She didn't return to the table again. In the evening, the couple went home. I don't believe there is such a friendship, Betty said to her husband in the evening. How can it be? Because we have one. He looked surprised. Yes, I realized that, but still, she was silent. But it was true. In all the years of their friendship, neither the boys among themselves, nor the girls, nor their families had ever quarreled. There had been a few misunderstandings, but never a big fight. Are you going out? Selena called her friend. I can't, it's my stomach, she admitted. You need to go to the hospital, the girl worried. She was silent, counting what Betty's due date was. I'd already thought about it. But I want to wait for Caustic, she said, but she was in pain. When are you due? Selena finally asked. In 3 days, clutched Betty. She was already sitting down. It hurt so much. Urgently, call an ambulance, her friend advised. Okay, there was silence on the other end of the phone. BT, Selena shouted, but there was silence in response. The girl crouched down in the hallway. She could hear her name being called from the tube, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't even inhale or exhale. The pain was so intense. A key was inserted into the keyhole. The girl turned around. Harry entered the apartment. He was in a good mood. He saw his wife on the floor. Everything immediately changed. He realized that he needed to go to the hospital. Now, love, 1 minute. He ran to the phone and dialed 911. Help! She held out her hand to him, but he didn't. He just walked over and lifted her into his arms. Everything was ready. All that was left was to wait for the paramedics. They arrived. Harry carried his wife to the car. They took her to the hospital. The young man wanted to go with them, but they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him in the hospital anyway. She was already in the labor room. There were doctors all around. "Come on, honey, soon you'll be a mom," the midwife commanded her. There was a baby crying in the room. Betty looked at the baby and cried too. She was now the mother of the most beautiful baby girl, Lucy. She took her tiny hand as she lay on her chest. "Congratulations," the doctor whispered in her ear. "Thank you." The girl lay there, somewhere in the distance, still feeling the pain that had just been so intense that it hurt to even remember. After that, she was transferred to the ward, and Harry was already standing outside the window, waiting for his daughter to be shown to him. "Look, it's your daddy." She brought the little bundle to the window. "And my husband just cried." He shouted words of gratitude and wiped his tears. That made 6 of us. Her friends and her husband greeted her after she was discharged. "Yes, we'll become relatives," laughed the girl's mother. "I don't mind," Carlos said. They went home and decided to organize a small table. Lucy was a quiet child. After she was fed, she fell asleep and let her parents spend a few hours with their friends. John was a little over a year old. The boy was curious about who was brought in and put in the crib. He stood looking at his future girlfriend. "Why, Lucy?" Selena asked. "I don't know," looked at her and realized that's what she was going to be called. Betty turned to her husband. "It's okay. It's a great name." He kissed her hands. After a brief sit-down, the friends left, leaving the young parents alone with the baby. Lucy was growing up, as on the first day she was very quiet, not crying much, only at night when it was feeding time. Now Selena and Betty were walking together in the park with their strollers. "We should get together," Selena suggested. Yes, her friend agreed with her. They were visiting with Betty and Harry. The friends were sitting on the couch watching John and Lucy discussing something on their own. The girl was still so young that she was babbling incomprehensible things, but the boys seemed to understand everything. Let them grow up together, and then they'll be together too. Carlos couldn't get enough of the children's play. "I don't mind," Selena said, just as she had at the maternity ward. "Neither do we," Harry turned to her. That's how the boys grew up, always close by. John went to daycare late. He was practically 3 years old. Betty had tried to find a place for Lucy too. Now the boy and the girl were in the same garden. Their mothers picked them up every day, and they walked home together. When it was time to go to school, Selena would not put John with her stream. They waited a year, and the kids walked to September 1 together. "We did it," cheered the moms as their kids walked to class with their teacher. Yes, they hugged. From that moment on, John and Lucy became inseparable. They sat at the same desk, went everywhere together. They were even teased as bride and groom. "How are you doing at school?" a mother would ask her daughter when she got home. "Not you, but you," the girl told her. She was in the 7th grade. "Good. How are you doing in school?" smiled the woman. She was pleased that they had once made the right choice. John was sticking up for Lucy now. He loved her and would never let her get hurt. "Everything is fine. Today I talked to Selena. He said that after school we'll get married right away," blushed the girl. "Where are you in a hurry ahead of the whole life?" Did not understand the mother, but did not have anything against it. They gathered with friends, the children together, they too. "You know what my daughter said to me today?" They were sitting around the table again. "We know. John pleased us too," laughed Selena. The husbands looked at each other. They too were supportive of the children. School was going great. The boy and girl didn't have to run anywhere. They often spent time at home. "Exams are coming up. Have you prepared?" Betty came into the room. "Of course," turned at the same time, guys. "Good, I believe in you." She walked out and they were alone again. At prom, everyone was together again. "Remember standing here with you when our boys went to 1st grade?" whispered Selena to Betty. "Of course, it seems like yesterday to me." The woman brushed away a tear. "And now we're already seeing them off," sighed the other. "Nothing. I believe that everything will be fine." Their husbands joined them. That's how it was. When the official part was over and the graduates went to greet the dawn, John asked for silence on the bus. Everyone looked at him in surprise and fell silent. "Lucy," he knelt in the aisle by her seat, "will you marry me?" The classmates applauded. Some started whistling and hooting. "Of course I will." She hugged him and took the ring. John stood up. He hugged Lucy. Ever since he was a little boy, this boy knew that she would be his one and only and his favorite. They reached the place. Everything was calm and Jacobtic. The boys separated from the big company and spent time alone. Look, showed the girl the ring to her mom in the morning. Guys, why in silence? Why did not tell us anything? She took Lucy's hand and looked closer at the jewelry. I did not know, John so decided. Probably today we will gather, modestly answered the daughter. Okay, I'll go call Selena. The mother walked down the hallway and smiled. Everything was just as they wanted it to be. The families gathered together. They congratulated their children and rejoiced that they would soon be relatives. Well, shall we go? Lucy looked at her lover. It was only a few days before their wedding and they had a lot to do. Yes, nodded the boy. Everyone was busy with business. Lucy had taken her entrance exams only a week ago. John hadn't joined her. He was due to serve in the army. The wedding was in the last days of August. After that, Lucy started to prepare for her studies. John received a summons. It was not very happy news, but the guy did not show any sign. How am I here without you? She snuggled up to her husband in the evening. They were sitting at home in front of the TV. Lucy, you're at it again. He was nervous. What's the big deal if I'm worried? She looked up at her lover. You think I'm not worried? They talked about it every day, so the topic got a little tiresome. John, for some time before the draft, came to the same city where the girl studied. He didn't want to live away from his wife. Will you come with me? Or by the weekend we'll be at your parents'? Asked her boyfriend, when before his departure was only a few days. Of course, I will go. She did not understand his question, because she loved him so much that she was ready to go to the army. The girl wrote a statement so that she would not be lost in her studies. The reason was serious, so no one would not interfere. Selena and Betty were crying. The fathers just kept silent. Friends gathered around the table, all raising their glasses and doing something. Dismissed early, Lucy and John went into the room. Will you wait? He looked at the girl. Why do you ask? Of course, yes, she kissed him. Tears rolled down from her eyelashes by themselves. Lucy couldn't help it. In the morning at the train station, she stood and stared blankly at the departing train. Don't worry, daughter. Time will pass quickly. We will support you. Her mother-in-law hugged her. Thank you. She turned away and walked away. Now the girl wanted only one thing, to go with her head into study, to do something, only if the hours and weeks would pass faster. Daughter, maybe you should move temporarily to a dormitory. Why spend money on rented accommodation? Her mother asked her. Yes, I also thought about it. There are girls there. Everything will not be so sad in the evenings. Lucy has already packed things for the move. Good, you're a good girl. The woman hugged her. John wrote often. In his letters he described where he was, what they were doing there. Lucy answered him with the same frequency. Why are you always sitting here like a mouse in a hole? The roommate came in after a walk. I'm studying. She pointed to her notes. I'm also studying, but you don't need to wave your hand at yourself. Come with us tomorrow. You'll have a good time, she suggested to her. I don't know what my husband will say. She looked at the sealed envelope that was to be sent tomorrow. I think he'll be all for it. Julia sat down on her bed. Okay, we'll see tomorrow, Lucy agreed. The next day in the evening, she and a few other girls went for a walk around town. They decided to sit for a while in the recreation area, which was in the very center. There was a fountain, of course. At this time of year it was not working, and a few benches, their girlfriends and occupied. Why did you get married so early? Julia asked the girl. I don't know, John wanted it that way, she answered. It is clear that nothing is clear, she laughed. Lucy heard the girl and looked around. She didn't know who knew her. Archie, she saw her classmate. How are you here? He came over, with a few other kids with him. I'm studying. Why are you here and not in the army? John's gone. She motioned for the boy to sit down. And I got in. I have a deferment. He looked at the girls. He remembered that he was not alone. I see. But my husband didn't want to, she said sadly. Oh yes, he's your husband. Archie remembered the proposal and the wedding. Yes, she noticed that the young men had approached the girls and were now getting acquainted. There's nothing to be bored of, the young man said cheerfully. Come with us. It'll be fun. It probably won't work tonight. Lucy turned to Julia, looking to her for support. Why not? The time is still childish. We'll have time for everything. The neighbor was already sitting next to the guy. Okay, the girl was not worried. Archie was a normal guy. He would not give her offense. That evening, they went to the young men's apartment. They rented it for everyone. The guys quickly organized the table. Funny dishes started to appear on it. Wine, melted cheese, bread, leftover sausage, buns, student kit. "I'm so glad I met you today," served Archie a glass of Lucy's red liquid. "I won't," she pushed the container away with her hand. "Come on, here's to introductions," he insisted. The girl looked at the others. Everyone was having fun. They were already drinking heavily. Well, she took the glass. Archie raised his own. They silently touched, and Lucy took a sip. She had tasted champagne once before, when they had been married, so she didn't like the tart liquid. The girl wanted to put the glass on the table, but the guy didn't let her do it. In the evening, when it was already very dark outside the window, Lucy and Archie sat in a small room on his bed. The girl's head was spinning. She was smiling. "Lucy, do you know how much I loved you at school?" he whispered in her ear, hugging her himself. "Archie, I'm married." She pulled his hands away. "I know, and I'm not saying anything, but my husband's not around." His breath tickled her neck. It was funny. I'm not like that," she said in a slurred voice. "Okay, I can wait." He kissed her cheek, then stood up, helped her up. "Maybe we'll go to the dorm. We have school tomorrow." She saw Julia making out with one of the guys. "Do you want me to walk you out?" Archie asked her. Yeah, she wasn't going to stay here. They reached the dormitory without adventure. Archie hugged Lucy on the steps. "I'll come back tomorrow. We'll go for a walk," he told her, his face so close it looked like he was going to kiss her. Lucy herself doesn't know what was wrong with her at that moment, but she wanted it. Archie touched her lips gently and let go. She walked into the building, went up to her room, lay in bed, and instantly fell asleep. In the morning, she walked to class and remembered what had happened yesterday. Why she acted like that, what she was missing. It was embarrassing. She had only met Julia at school, and she was cheerful. "Are you going to the guys today?" she asked her friend. No, the girl didn't want to. But no one considered her opinion. Archie came to pick her up in the evening. He was waiting for her on watch while she got ready. All day long, the girl knew she wasn't going anywhere in the evening. But as soon as she was told that a young man had come, she gladly began to get ready. "Hi," she walked out to him. "What took you so long? It's like a date," he laughed, and they walked outside. Lucy liked walking next to the strong and handsome Archie. Of course, she had no feelings for him, just friends. But the guy didn't understand that. He perceived her behavior as if she was flirting with him, and she'd agreed to go out. "Archie, why?" He brought her a huge bouquet of flowers. "I just like to make you feel good." He hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. In her letters to John, Lucy never said a word about being in a relationship. They also corresponded, confessed their love to each other. Lucy wrote that she was waiting for him. And the new friend kept coming, bringing gifts, flowers, inviting her on dates, which Lucy took for simple meetings. "Are you ready?" He came for her again. Yes, she came out to him. It was already warm outside, so it was possible to spend time somewhere in a summer cafe. "Lucy, I care about you." The young man took her hand. "Archie, why, you know everything." She lowered her eyes and took his hand away. "Perhaps your love with John is all far-fetched," he told her. "That's enough. I'm going home." She still wouldn't look him in the eye. "Okay, think about it." It turned out that they spent the summer together, and in September, they started to meet again in the city where they studied. "We should celebrate our new year of study," Juliet insisted. "I don't mind," Archie said immediately. They got together again at the guy's apartment. Wine, talking, laughing, dancing. Archie went to see Lucy off. As they walked past the park, he put his arm around her. "What are you doing?" She pulled his arm away. "Lucy, stop breaking down." He was very drunk. "Archie, stop it. I trust you as a friend. And you." She walked faster. "What about me?" The guy caught up with her and grabbed her arm. "Nothing." She was trying to get away. "Wait, why did you let me do all that then?" He shouted in her face. "What did I let you do?" She really didn't understand. Taking gifts, going on dates, what? It was all for nothing. He couldn't calm down. "Stop it. Let me go." She ripped my arm out and ran. "No, I'm not letting you go that easily." He pushed her. "Please, you've been so good," she cried. "It's over." He pulled up her skirt. "Bastard," she spat in his face. The guy stopped. The spit seemed to sober him up. He sat down on the pavement. At that moment, Lucy jumped to her feet and ran as fast as she could to the dormitory. "Lucy, what happened?" The janitor shouted to her. She saw that the girl's hair was disheveled and her sweater was torn, but she had already run away without answering her question. Archie didn't show up for a few days, probably because he was ashamed and Lucy didn't want to see him. The girl did not tell anyone anything, just stopped gathering company. "Why weren't you with us yesterday?" Julia asked her. "Just did not want to, try to look natural, girl." "Well, I see I'm not in the mood. I don't want to pester the neighbor." Archie showed up a week later. He called Lucy. She didn't want to go at first, but it was necessary to find out everything to the end. The girl came down to the watch. "Let's go for a walk," her boyfriend called her. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you." She remembered the last walk. "Why, I love you," he shouted so that everyone paid attention to them. "Enough, stop this concert. My husband is coming back any day now." She wanted to leave. "You'll be sorry," he began to threaten. "What can you do?" grinned the girl and went to her room. John wrote down the date he would be back. By this day, Lucy had arrived at her parents' house to meet her beloved husband with them. John got off the wagon all handsome. He walked up to his mother-in-law and wife. All together they went home to celebrate the meeting. The fathers were not at the train station. They prepared everything at home. When everyone was assembled, the questioning began. And the next day the guy and the girl went to the city. There they again rented an apartment. The guy wanted to enter at least a college, to have at least some education. "How glad I am that we are together again," she hugged her lover. "Thank you for waiting." He pressed her against him. For a week, everything was very good in the couple. On Monday, Lucy went to study. She had no premonitions. She sat out her classes. After that, she went to the store, bought groceries, and hurried home. "Selena, I'm home," she shouted as she entered the apartment. She didn't hear a response. She walked into the room. The guy wasn't there and neither were his things. Lucy stood confused. She didn't understand what had happened. "Please pick up the phone." She stood with the phone in her hands. Her husband was unavailable. She threw the phone on the bed. She herself buried herself in her pillow and started to cry. He couldn't go anywhere, only to his mom. The girl got out of bed, began to pack. Not a few hours later, she was in her hometown. "Mom, did John come by?" she asked from the doorstep. "What are you doing here?" A woman came out to her. "Answer me." Lucy was waiting. "No, what happened?" Her mother was curious. "I'll tell you later." "I don't know yet." She went to her mother-in-law's. "Aunt Selena," she knocked on the door. "What do you want?" John opened it. "Please, love, explain what's going on." She wanted to hug him, but he pulled her arms away. "Lucy, we're breaking up." He was very serious. "What? Why?" She sat down on the poof in the hallway, covered her face with her hands and cried. "Here, this is not enough for you." He did not explain anything to her, threw an envelope in front of the girl. Lucy took the envelope, opened it. There was a letter and many pictures. The paper stated that she had been dating a certain Archie for a year. He gave her flowers, gifts, went out, kissed her. Attached to all this were photographs. One of her sitting on Vladimir's lap, another of him giving her flowers. Lucy threw it all on the floor. She cried even more, realized that the classmate so decided to get back at her. "Selena, I'm sorry, but we had nothing." She approached her husband. "Don't call me that." It was obvious he had no intention of communicating. "I swear to you. Yes, we dated, we went out, but it never went any further than that." She was silent, remembering the night Archie had almost committed a terrible act. "Why didn't you write to me about it? He's a friend of ours. I would have said you were in the same company, but you didn't. Why?" He didn't look at her. "I don't know. I didn't want to upset you. I don't need anyone else but you." She sat down next to him. "No, I can't forgive that." The boy put his head down on his hands. But why? She was getting hysterical. "It's a betrayal," he said quietly. "John, I understood everything. I realized I only need you." She stood up, came up behind him and hugged him. "Lucy, don't. He hasn't done anything. He's a scoundrel because I didn't go with him. He did that so you and I would break up." Lucy didn't want to tell him about that situation. "I don't care which one of you." "Which one?" He got up and went into the hallway. The pictures were still lying there. I'm not leaving until you forgive me, Lucy said. Well, you can settle down. You've been here a million times. You know what's where. The guy started to put on his shoes. And you, the girl cried again. And I need to think it over. He walked out and slammed the door. Not 15 minutes later, the door opened and Selena walked in. She saw the girl, the mess in the hallway, came up to her. What happened here? The mother-in-law asked. John left, slumped down in Lucy's chair. After that, they called Betty. She came over. Lucy told them everything. Yes, I know that she was in touch with this Archie. They even came to visit together, was surprised by the mother that her husband did not believe her daughter. Look what he sent him, showed the girl the pictures, chose the most provocative ones. The women read and looked at everything. So, now I'll call him. Selena got up and started dialing her son's number. What's he saying? Betty looked at her. Lucy, go home. He said he'll think about it. He'll come and talk to you. Selena spoke quietly and stroked her daughter-in-law's back. Do you promise? She raised her eyes to her. Yes, she kissed the top of her head. Lucy packed up and walked to the train station. She sat in the apartment again and suffered. How she wanted to find Archie now and tell him everything. But she knew how mean he was, so she didn't want to make things worse. The next day she was back at school. Every time she came home she hoped John had arrived, but he hadn't. Hi, he came after a month. John, she wanted to throw herself at him but didn't. She thought she would push him away. I came to talk to him. He came into the apartment. And that was it? Lucy felt like she was going to cry again. Let's see. He walked over and sat down on the couch. Ask me, I'll tell you everything. She sat down next to him. Tell me everything as it happened, her husband asked. And Lucy told for about an hour how it all began and how it ended. The only thing she missed was the story in the park. Why didn't you tell him you thought of him as a friend? The young man couldn't understand. How could I realize that he doesn't know it himself, she reflected. Yeah, you still have a lot of learning to do, he smirked. John, I swear to you that, between us, nothing happened. She moved closer to him. I believe you. He reached out and hugged her. Really? She snuggled in. I went out with him. He couldn't really say anything. And at the end, he admitted he was doing it out of spite, just like you said. John leaned over and started kissing his wife. Lucy was glad that she and her husband were doing well. Now every morning she prepared his breakfast, went to study, and in the evening they had Jacoptic meetings. John went to school, at the same time went to work in the police. Lucy rejoiced in her husband's success. Darling, guess what? She was holding a small box. I don't know. He took the gift from her hands. Open it. She stood there without breathing. The young man opened the lid, looked first inside and then at Lucy. Is this what I think it is? He didn't want to get excited ahead of time. Yes, she clapped her hands together. Inside the box was a 2-strike pregnancy test and a pacifier. We love it. He stood up and hugged her. Afterwards, the young people informed the future grandmothers about everything. The latter were, of course, delighted. John continued to work. Lucy had only a few months to finish her studies. After that, she was not going to get a job anywhere because she would start her maternity leave. Wait, her husband pulled away from her. His phone was ringing. Okay, she went into the kitchen. Honey, I'm being paged. He's leaning over her from behind. What? It's your day off, she got upset. Yeah, but some thugs robbed the cash register in one of the villages. They were spotted and now they're inside shooting back. He was fully dressed. Be careful, his wife kissed him. He walked out of the apartment. Lucy herself doesn't know why, but she crossed him. She had never done that before. Lucy, the phone rang in the night. Yes, she didn't understand anything when she woke up. You can come to the hospital. John is hurt, a male voice told her calmly. Not understanding, she sat up in bed. Come, a silence formed on the other end. She didn't realize what she was doing. Rushed to the hospital. What? She expected to be led to John now. Those scumbags were shooting buckshot. He's been hit. He's unconscious now. Muttered what was probably a co-worker. Can I see him? Lucy asked. I don't know. He looked around, looking for a doctor. The girl was thrashing around the corridor. She couldn't gather herself. When the doctor came to them, he explained that the wound was serious. The shot could go in different directions. Lucy started calling her and John's parents. By morning, everyone was gathered. Selena was crying. No one was bothering her. For 3 long days, women and men took turns being on duty at the hospital. And on the morning of the 4th day, John died without regaining consciousness. "Daughter," her mother called her. "No," she screamed into the phone. "Hold on." Her mother tried to find words of encouragement, but nothing worked. "I'm coming." Lucy wanted to get out of her seat and run to them. "No, you don't have to. We'll be right there." Betty stopped her. Everyone was saddened by this sad event. They just sat there in silence. Lucy was staring at one point on the wall. She couldn't even move. "Daughter, you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Your husband was a hero." Carlos sat down next to her. "I know." Her voice was lifeless. The day of the funeral, Lucy went crazy. Nothing could stop her. She screamed like a wounded animal. And when no one was home, she even tried to kill herself. But her mother came back in time. "Daughter, what are you doing? You have to live. You will have a child." She grabbed her and held her for so long until she stopped kicking. "Mom, I can't do without him. He's my life, my love," the girl screamed. "Everything will be fine. Remember that you'll have a little one soon. Then your brains will fall into place." That's how Harry caught them when he got back to the apartment. What? He didn't finish, he realized. The procession was very slow. So many people had gathered: colleagues, acquaintances, friends, relatives. They were really burying him like a hero. And only Lucy and Selena sat on the bench because they could not believe that their boy and husband were no longer in this world. "I will always be with you." Lucy rushed to the grave. Her father managed to grab her in time. He was ready for it. When it was all over, she just fell on all those wreaths and flowers and sobbed in her voice. "What can I do to help her?" Betty looked at her husband. But at that moment, the girl was writhing in pain, and her mother noticed it and came running over. "She's bleeding," the woman noticed. "Hurry up and call an ambulance." The car arrived. The girl looked like a mad woman. The paramedics had to deal with her. When everyone arrived at the hospital, it was clear that nothing good to expect. And so it was. The doctor came out and told the family that the girl's baby was gone. Why did this happen to her, to our girl?" cried Beatty. The father was also somber. "The girl is under sedation now, but in the evening you can pick her up," mumbled the doctor. "Okay." Beatty looked at her friends. "Unequivocally, we are taking her with us," said Harry. When her parents arrived in the evening, Lucy wasn't herself. She seemed to exist, but really everything inside felt like it had been scorched. When she arrived at her parents' house, all she did was lock herself in her room and sit there, tears flowing all by themselves. "Daughter, you have to come to your senses," Selena told her. "I understand that, but everything died inside me." Looked at her with colorless eyes. "Daughter, well, tell me, what do you see as a way out of this situation?" The mother was ready to do anything to help her girl. "I was thinking, maybe I should go somewhere. I will be distracted by my work. I will forget." Lucy turned away to the window. "Of course, if it will make you feel better, then please," she went on all the girls' terms. Already the next day, Lucy began to pack. Her friend had long ago suggested that she go to work on a shift. And now she was finally right for it. "Julia, is your offer still valid?" Lucy called her. "Yes, of course. We're always in need of hands," she said happily. "Then meet me in a couple of days and I'll call you," Lucy decided. She sat at the table with her relatives. It was not as cheerful as it had always been. Selena supported her choice. She continued to socialize with Betty. Lucy slept very badly that night. She was plagued by nightmares. She dreamed of a girl who was reaching out to her and asking her not to leave. In the morning, the girl woke up in a cold sweat. Lucy left. She sat on the train, looking out the window and thought about nothing. At the station, she was met by Julia. The friends hugged. While driving to the place, the girl told everything that happened. She could only sympathize. "Well, here we are." They got out near some building. Now Lucy had to live in the dormitory again. And again her roommate was Julia. "Just like back at school," she smiled. "Yes," Lucy shook her head. In the morning they went to work. The new girl had to learn everything. They had to work in the dining hall, washing dishes, floors, walls, and everything else. Sometimes you'd be asked to serve. It was understandable. "Well, do you agree?" Her neighbor looked at her. Yes, I have no choice. Lucy was ready for anything. The work was hard at first. When she got involved in the process, there was no time left at all. From the very morning until late in the evening, the girl was in the kitchen. She came home and just fell off her feet. But after she realized everything, she grew to working time. Now she could have tea with the girls and go out in the evening. Let's go. There is a place where everyone gathers to spend leisure time. Julia called her when it had been a few weeks. Okay, Lucy wanted to go out. They packed up and set off on their adventure. Lucy knew that with Julia she was sure to find them. Oh, what beauties! They hadn't gotten anywhere yet and they had already been spotted. Two young men stopped to meet the girls. Hi, Julia said to them. What do you plan to do? The young men were curious. We haven't decided yet, the neighbor said honestly, and it was true. Come on, you can help brighten up our boring evening, they called the girls. Lucy said nothing, watching. They came to the local cafe, which was very small, but there were so many people here that it was strange how everyone got in. So here's to the meeting. The young men were fun. Let's get acquainted. The first thing Lucy said pleased everyone. That's right. The people in the room caught on. I'm Steve, and this is my friend Austin. Now spoke the one who before that was also more silent. Lucy sat sad. She didn't want anything. Then Steve called her outside. Do you want to go for a walk? He was already giving her his hand. Okay, they went. The town was small. They came to a house. Would you like to come in? The new acquaintance asked. Why not? Lucy didn't care. They went into the place where Steve had rented a place. It was obvious that he was not alone. Wine? He pulled a bottle out of the cupboard. Come on, the girl agreed to everything. When the bottle was emptied, Lucy sat looking at the young man. Come to me. He held out his arms to her. She stood up and walked over dizzy. It felt good because all thoughts had gone somewhere. Steve sat her on his lap and started kissing her. The girl liked it. She gave in to his caresses. She was staying with him that night. Wake up. You have to go to work. Steve woke her up in the morning. Her head hurt. It felt like it was going to fall apart. Yes, thank you. Lucy was embarrassed because she found 3 other males in the room. I'll come back tonight, the young man promised, but Lucy never met him again. What, are you waiting for him? Asked Julia. How is it that in such a small town, we have not met for several weeks? Did not understand the girl. They can come for a one-time job, pull a heating main or an electrician, and go to the next object, explained the neighbor. I see. Lucy looked at her hands, which had become rough from the detergents. They continued to get out with her friend. Lucy had already gotten into the work. In the 6 months she had been working here, she had not given up wine and men. Lucy, you weren't like this. What happened to you? Julia asked her. My problems. She didn't want to justify herself to anyone. Her mother called every day. Lucy sent her money and lied that there was a lot of work and she couldn't come home. Betty believed her, so she didn't say anything. And the girl went on with her life. Julia, are you coming today or not? She called her friend. Wait, she had a headache, so she couldn't get out of bed. Okay, I'll go then, slammed the girl's door. It wasn't often that they had time to go out, so she didn't want to waste it. That evening she met Sasha. He was so handsome and also brutal, it seemed to Lucy. They took a long walk, talked, and then went to visit him. He lived alone. That was good. Lucy and Alexander spent the night together. In the morning, Lucy went to her place. She no longer expected to meet the man, but he came the next day. You? The girl was surprised then. Why such a surprise? He did not understand. Simply, she was ashamed to admit it. Are you coming? He waited for an answer. Yes, this insolence and something else like Lucy and this man. Once again, they were at Alexander's house. Everything was going well. He was doing a lot for the girl. Julia, he asked me to live with him, Lucy told her friend in the evening. And you? She tensed up. Why, I'll probably agree. The girl was glad. He is some kind of murky, did not believe Alexander neighbor. You just don't know him. That's the first impression. Lucy was sure of it. It's up to you to decide. Her friend pressed her lips together. She didn't like it. Okay, don't be offended. She hugged and kissed her neighbor, took her suitcase and left the room. From that moment, Alexander and Lucy formed a couple. They went everywhere together. Everything was fine. When the girl began to live together with Alexander, she began to notice that he was doing something illegal in addition to working here. One day, she decided to ask, but she was answered so rudely that she didn't even think about it anymore. "Why are your eyes red?" Julia noticed at work. "Don't mind her," Lucy turned away from her. "I see, she's hitting you," her friend guessed. No, she was telling the truth. It's just that she cried all night after a big scolding. "Okay, tell me if anything," continued the girl. With Sasha was difficult, but Lucy swallowed everything. After all, stability. She noticed that different people came to him. They talk about something, do something. But the girl didn't dare to ask about it anymore. "Lucy, aren't you going home at all?" Her mother asked her when she called. "Mommy, of course I'm going, but not now, a little later." She couldn't explain anything to the woman. "Who called you?" Alexander came up to her. "Mommy," she showed her phone. "I can also write Mom and Angelica will call me," he spoke in a stern voice. "Are you jealous?" She laughed. It was the first time he had ever hit her. Lucy stood, holding her cheek, and looked at Alexander. No one had ever touched her in her life until that moment. "If you misbehave, you'll get another," he promised her. Why? She didn't deserve to be treated like that. "You asked me how many men you've had in all the time you've lived here, and now all they say is that I picked up the poor guy. If I'd known before, I never would have done such a thing." He clenched his fists. "That was before you," she thought. She was acting roughly now. That was it. The conversation was over. The man just walked out of the apartment. Lucy wanted to leave, but she was afraid. There was no one to complain to either. When she got to work the next day, she decided to share with her friend. Can you imagine the look on her face when she told her everything? "Report it," Julia advised her. "I'm scared," Lucy admitted honestly. "Do you want me to report it?" she suggested. "Try, but if he finds out, we'll be in trouble," her friend told her. "Don't worry, we've been in more trouble than this," she promised her. Lucy returned home. She was really afraid of her roommate, but she had nothing to do but wait. A week passed. Alexander came home. "Did you snitch?" He came up to Lucy and grabbed her by the chest. "What are you talking about?" She made big eyes. "You know what?" He gathered some things, then put a chair in the middle of the room and sat the girl down. "What are you doing?" She was shaking, scared. "You'll find out now," he grinned. Alexander tied her to the chair. He doused everything with a smelly liquid for fear. Lucy did not even immediately realize that it was gasoline. He took one more look at her. He flicked a match, threw it on, and closed the doors. "Help!" She began to scream with all her might. At that moment came the realization that she was not living right, but no one heard the girl. The house was old and wooden. The logs were quickly seized by the fire. Someone called the fire department. Lucy was panting. She rocked harder on the chair. She fell down. It was easier here. But she realized she was losing consciousness. When she was at her wit's end, she felt someone lift her off the floor. "Lucy!" She opened her eyes. Julia was sitting next to her. "Where is he?" The girl's first question was. "Don't worry, he's right where he needs to be," her friend reassured her. "Well and good." Lucy closed her eyes. "Imagine, you were right. He was doing all sorts of nonsense to destroy everything. Everything, and set it on fire so they wouldn't find it." Julia started whispering. "Yeah, and me for one," the girl cried. "All's well that ends well." The neighbor squeezed her hand. "What did the doctor say?" Lucy wanted to know. "Nothing happened to you, just smoke inhalation," the neighbor reassured her. "I want to go home so badly." The girl was still crying. "Everything will be all right," Julia nodded her head. Lucy was discharged. She immediately wrote a statement and went home. Now on the train, the girl sat. She understood everything and realized that she had been bad. How could she have let John down like that? What had happened to her? "Mom," she walked into the apartment. The prodigal daughter had finally returned. Her father came out to meet her. "Where's Mom?" She came up and hugged Dad. "She will come now, in the store," he replied. It was nice and cozy at home. Lucy went to her room. Everything was so nice here. "Lucy?" Mommy asked from the hallway. Mom ran to her girl. "Hello, dear," hugged her. They went into the kitchen. The woman put the kettle on and then began to assemble the table. "What a fool I was," Lucy said, looking at her mother. Don't talk bad. You were stressed. You felt bad. The woman reassured her. Yes, everything can be. Her daughter agreed with her. Lucy decided to exhale a little and then start her life over again. She looked for job vacancies. Not 2 weeks later, she was invited to work. Where was it this time? Betty was sitting there knitting something. Where I went to school, her daughter confessed. Alone? The mother looked down. For now, she went over and hugged her favorite people. Good. Her mother agreed with her again. Lucy took out the diploma she had once received, packed her things and left. She had rented an apartment on the phone. Now all she had to do was pay for it. She got the job. It was easy for Lucy. Lucy had done the right thing. Now she was working in the local hospital department as a nurse, but she liked it. Lucy, would you like to take another job? Her boss asked her. I'll have to think about it. She was just about to go home. She walked down the street and realized that there was never any extra money. Hello. Lucy entered the chief's office. Greetings. Have you made your decision? He asked her. Yes, I have. She smiled at him. Then write your application and you can start work. He handed her a blank sheet of paper. Lucy realized that it would be very hard, but the money would come. She wrote everything and left the office. In the evening, she was at home, sitting and thinking about what would happen next in her life. Lucy, you will pull all the veins out of yourself, Elizabeth told her. They met in the hospital. Now they began to communicate closely. What can I do? No one can help me, she said. Do you even have a rest? Her friend asked her. When? Lucy smiled at her. I see, let's go out. Elizabeth suggested it. It was rare, but the girl thought that after the day shift, in the evening you can relax. And indeed, with Elizabeth, they could go to a cafe or restaurant, spend a pleasant time there, relax. Oh, it's so good that you're taking me out. Lucy leaned back in her chair. What else do girlfriends do? She didn't understand. In this place, they liked most of all pleasant music, good cuisine, friendly staff. Girl, can I ask you to dance? A man approached Lucy. Of course, she looked at her friend and gave her hand. Anthony, he introduced himself as they walked to the center. Lucy, it had been a long time since she had danced with anyone or socialized with the opposite sex. You're a good dancer, he said. You too, she didn't know what to say. It was nice, thank you, he said at the end as he walked her back to her seat. Well, what's going on there? Did you get to know each other? Elizabeth started asking at once. Yes, Lucy's face blushed a little. And what then? She waited. Nothing. Thank you for the dance, you heard yourself. The girl raised her glass. But she was wrong. When they were about to go home, Anthony came up to them. Can I walk such beautiful ladies home? He walked in the middle. Of course, smiled Elizabeth. She lived with the man, now taking care of her friend. They walked. There was a casual conversation. Elizabeth saw her boyfriend ahead, said goodbye and ran to him. Where do you live? Anthony asked. Why are you calling me? I look so old, she asked him. Sorry, he was embarrassed. They walked on. There's my house. They walked up to the driveway. Can we exchange phone numbers? He tried. Yes, Lucy agreed. Anthony was a nice man. She walked home, feeling as if flowers were blooming on her soul. Anthony called the next day. Although Lucy was very busy, she took a moment to talk to him. He offered to meet, but she couldn't today. It was the night shift. All I can suggest is that tonight you come here. I'll be out, she muttered. Okay, that would be fine with me for starters. She could hear how pleased he was. Lucy didn't know if he would come or not, but she'd hoped he would. And he came, and not just for no reason, but with flowers. God, it's been 1,000 years since anyone gave me flowers. She took the bouquet and smelled it. It makes me feel good to do this, he smiled. From that day on, Anthony and Lucy started dating. When it was a day off, they would go to the park or just sit in the yard. The rest of the days, as it worked out. Why do you live in a rented apartment? Move in with me, he suggested to her after 6 months of meetings. Would that be convenient? She was afraid. She'd already trusted him once. What are you saying? Of course it would be convenient, he laughed. I'll have to think about it, Lucy smiled. Of course, he understood that. Okay, I agree. Lucy thought to herself that she'd have found a real man. They started living together. Anthony was flying on wings. Why don't you have a rug in your house? Lucy asked him one day. I don't know, I hadn't thought about it. He looked at the floor, which was covered with linoleum. We should get some, she concluded. Suit yourself, he said, but he didn't offer to give money. Okay, Lucy isn't proud. She has enough. She'll do it all herself. In 6 months, she bought 2 carpets, bedding, a kitchen set, which was assembled by specially hired people. Could you do it yourself? The woman was surprised when she came home from work. You see, the hands do not grow from there. He waved his hands. After that, it was his turn to buy a bed, and then a large closet for clothes. Why are you doing this? Elizabeth asked her when Lucy was telling her. Why, I live there too. I want it to be comfortable. Lucy did not understand the question. Oh, you live like this with men, you invest in them, and then they leave you, Elizabeth sighed. At that moment, Lucy remembered Alexander, shrugged. No, Anthony is not like that. Elizabeth, can you lend me a couple thousand? I saw such a nice shirt. I wanted to buy Anthony, she asked her friend. What, you also dress him? She was amazed. What's the big deal? Lucy was amazed again. Did he buy you anything besides that broom on the first date? No, Lucy thought. Well, you're ready to try. All in your Anthony. He only did what he did to bring you to his place. She marveled at the woman's naivety. Come on, he does so much for me, Lucy said. Oh, you'll be on his side no matter what you say. She wouldn't lend money to her friend. Fine, I'll borrow it somewhere else, she said. She liked to come home, cook for her lover, and then lie in a warm bed. We're having guests over today, Anthony said. Good, it's the day shift. She came over and kissed him. Are you gonna get everything ready? He looked expectant. When I'll be at work all day, let's order in. She hoped Anthony would agree. Okay, just do it yourself. I don't have time, he went out. Elizabeth, would you like to join us today? She asked when she got to the service. What's the occasion? She was curious. Nothing. Just Anthony invited some friends and I thought I'd invite you. She was scrubbing the floors and talking at the same time. Well, we'll be there tonight. My friend didn't mind. Lucy, as promised Anthony, ordered everything. She paid for the order. All that was left was to receive it at home. In the evening, she saw that many strangers had come. They were her husband's co-workers. As long as everyone was sitting at the table, talking and eating, everything was fine. But at some point, Lucy realized that the guests had had too much to drink. We should dance, Anthony said. Okay, one of the girls got up and turned up the volume. Won't the neighbors fight? Elizabeth asked Lucy. No, they are normal. The woman was sure of it. She went to the kitchen to get more snacks. Look, when she came back, her friend pointed with her eyes to a couple dancing. It was Anthony and that girl dancing. Fine, let them relax. Lucy waved them off. Yeah, if someone danced with Barry like that, I'd kill them. Elizabeth followed her friend. They sat down at the table, but Lucy couldn't help but stare at what her man was doing. They were wriggling so much, he touched the girl on every bulging spot she had. That's enough. She got up from the table and turned the sound down. What's the matter? The ones who were just bouncing on the carpet stopped. What are you doing here? She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she couldn't help it. Okay, what are you yelling about? Anthony said, and they giggled with the girl. And you still believe him? Asked Elizabeth as she put her coat on in the hallway. Stop it, Lucy interrupted her. Okay, your life, but I suggest you take a closer look, her friend warned her. Lucy returned to the room and the couple stood again, already without music, moving slowly. She saw Anthony hugging her as if he wanted to take her immediately. She got disgusted, turned away and left. She cried in the kitchen. All the guests had left, only this girl was left. Elizabeth was in pain. She started washing dishes to distract herself. She heard the front door slam, thought it was the girl leaving. Anthony? She went into the room, but there was no one there. She'd done so much for this union and he'd do this to her. She cleaned up, made the bed, and went to bed. He came in the morning, smelling someone else's perfume in the bed. Did you like it? Lucy turned to him. What? He wasn't quite sober yet. The broad, Lucy explained. Are you jealous? He chuckled. No, the girl lied. Well, sleep then. He turned on his side and sniffled. How to live after that? She just didn't sleep until morning. Hi, she said hello to everyone when she got to work. Why do you look so bad? Elizabeth whispered to her. Not sleeping well, Lucy didn't feel like sharing her thoughts with anyone. I see I've made a mess of things, her friend guessed. What should I do? The girl almost burst into tears in response. In the first place, leave one position, all the money you cannot earn, and you are not like a man, advised Elizabeth. I've already thought about it, she nodded. Today, she went and wrote a statement. If Anthony was making a decent income, she would quit. She was so fed up. As the years went by, Lucy continued to live with the same Anthony. They were satisfied with their mutual neighborliness. There was no love lost between them. He went out without even hiding it. What's wrong with me? She asked him one day. What kind of questions? The man looked at her surprised. Just leave it. She didn't want to continue the conversation. If he didn't understand, she didn't have to. Lucy, you need another man, Elizabeth said. You look at me. Who will look at me? Self-critically answered her friend. You want to talk about yourself. You are still beautiful. Just a long time ago did not take care of themselves. The girl encouraged her as she could. I did everything for him, and he is so, cried Lucy. Everything. Do not regret anything. You still have everything ahead of you. Elizabeth hugged her. They continued to work. Lucy wondered why she had given up the night shifts. She didn't want to go home, but there was nothing to do, and she again went to an empty apartment where everything was well done. She was cooking dinner, and the man did not want to return there. Where have you been? She felt his cold body at night under the blanket. That's it. Go back to sleep. He didn't turn to her. Tears choked. That night she decided everything. She went to work in the morning, spent half a day there, took a day off. She came home, packed her things. She couldn't stop the tears. At first I wanted to write a note, but in the end I decided not to. She stopped, circled the nest she herself had made with a glance, turned around and left. Hello, she came to Elizabeth. They had agreed that her friend would stay here for a couple of days. Come in quickly. She didn't want to keep her guest on the doorstep for long. They sat for a while, cooked dinner, ate, and went to bed. Lucy did not want to disturb the couple, so she stayed out of the room until nightfall. Lucy, go to the 8th room. A man needs help there, the head nurse asked her. She put a basin of clean towels on the table. She entered the room. He was lying on the bed. She did not understand whether the man was asleep or unconscious. Quietly, she approached the bed, checked the IV. Everything was normal there. Then she began to remove absorbent cotton, syringes, and other things from the bedside table. Drink, she heard, and she was scared. Now she took a mug that was standing there, dipped a cotton swab, and moistened his lips. He licked greedily. More, he asked. Yep, she repeated her movements. He wrinkled his nose and opened his eyes. The whites were red. The young man looked at Lucy. She blushed for some reason. He reminded her of John. She came over and sat on the edge of the bed, though it was not customary. If you could say so. He could hardly even speak, but he tried to smile. Soon you'll get better and you'll be as good as new, Lucy reassured the young man. Your words would be. He began to cough. The girl quickly approached. You don't have to talk much. She lifted his head to make him stop. Elizabeth, have you seen the patient from the 8th? She asked her friend in the corridor. No, why? She turned and looked at her in surprise. I don't know, but when I saw him, something inside clicked, Lucy admitted. That's a good sign, Elizabeth laughed. She decided to find out a little about who was in their facility. She asked this one, that one, the other one, the third one, and gathered a lot of information and gossip. Already in the evening, when they came home, Elizabeth called Lucy into the kitchen. They needed to talk. What are you suddenly in the middle of the week? The girl looked at the bottle of wine that stood on the table. We need to talk about something, Elizabeth said cryptically. Okay, Lucy took the glasses and poured ruby liquid into them. Listen, your new acquaintance is not simple. The hostess cut the cheese. I don't even know his name. Only later I realized that I could look it up in the medical records. She blushed again. I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of people say about him that he doesn't do the right things. Elizabeth lowered her voice. What kind of things? Lucy asked in a whisper, leaning over the table. Both laughed afterward. No one was home and they were vociferating. I do not know, said her friend seriously, but he is not in our hospital because he fell down the stairs. Why are you telling me all this? I'm not going to do anything. Lucy took a sip of wine. Yeah, I can see you sitting there, blushing and turning white. The girl smiled. Well, enough. Time will tell, you know. He reminded me something of my first husband. Immediately became sad eyes. Then I see Elizabeth guessed why everything is so. They sat until the husband of the friend came. Then they fed Sergei dinner, talked, and went to their rooms. In the morning, Lucy got up. Her mood was very good. For the first time in a long time, she sat in front of the mirror, made her hairstyle, made up her eyes. When she stepped out into the hallway, Elizabeth gasped. Lucy, you're so? She stopped talking. Like what? She smiled. I don't know, gentle, beautiful. They left the house and headed to their work. Lucy didn't wait to be asked or forced to go to room number 8. She went there herself. The first thing she did today was look at the medical history. She took it and looked at it like she was looking at what the patient had been prescribed. She read that his name was Jacob. She glanced out the window and said the name to herself again. What are you hanging out there? He's been looking at her for a few minutes now. I see you're feeling better, she said sarcastically. Give me a drink, he said sharply, and because his voice was hoarse, it seemed to be rude. Now, a little offended Lucy, she went to the nightstand and gave him a glass of water. Thanks, Sardi. He handed her back the empty glass. It's okay, she headed for the exit. Sit with me, the young man said in a different tone. What? She stopped at the door. Lucy heard everything, but she wished he would ask again. Stay with me, he didn't refuse her. Okay, she smiled, but when she turned to him, she was completely serious. Lucy walked over to the bed, pulled up a chair and sat down on it. Tell me about yourself. He lay on his back and looked up at the ceiling. My name is Lucy. I work here. She shrugged because she didn't know what to say next. Husband, kids? He turned his head slightly in her direction. Just like that, her cheeks began to blush again. Why are there any secrets? He grinned and then grimaced. No, Lucy was confused. I'm just kidding. My name is Jacob, and I'm not really into anything, so I came to you for a while, he said. Nice to meet you. The girl was embarrassed. It was obvious that he was getting better because he was already joking and talking a lot. That's what the girl told the doctor when she left the room. She could not wait to meet Elizabeth and tell her everything that had happened, but they didn't meet until the evening when they went home. Look, I promised I'd stay with you for a couple days, but it just so happens that I wasn't even looking for anything. Lucy looked at her friend. You what? Do not even think about it. Live as long as you want. You do not embarrass us, sincerely said Elizabeth. And we made friends today, bragged Lucy to her. With whom? She didn't understand because she was quick to change the subject. Jacob, Lucy laughed. Jacob who? She still couldn't understand. What Jacob could Jacob be like? The sick one from 8th grade. Lucy laughed, offended because that was all she could think about. Oh, that's what you mean. Elizabeth laughed at the fact that she hadn't realized it for so long. Yes, he told me about himself. I did the same and all. We are already friends. She recalled how it was. Actually, you can't flirt with patients. Elizabeth wagged her finger. I know, and I don't flirt. The girls were in high spirits. At home, it was business as usual. Lucy couldn't wait to go to bed. She wanted it to be morning already, and she wanted to be by his side. She was going to work alone today. She told Elizabeth that she would get out early to go to the store. No one had come to see the young man in 2 days, so she decided to make him happy with something. Lucy bought some fruit and juice and headed for the hospital. Here I am, she slipped into the room. Hey, he was already half sitting up on the pillows. Look what I brought you. She started to put everything she bought on the nightstand. And why? He looked at it all. To make you happy. She didn't understand his mood today. Okay, he smiled at her, just like last time. After that, they ate oranges, talked and laughed. It's all you was the only thing he kept saying. After that, Lucy started giving Jacob massages. Several times each day, she went up to him for it. He would yell, but she ignored it. They were getting up, taking their first steps. In 6 months, Jacob was standing on his own feet. He looked at the girl with great love and gratitude. Would you be my wife? He asked her at breakfast. Do you honestly want that? She couldn't believe she was sitting here with him, as if all those years she'd spent in a bad relationship hadn't happened. What are you talking about? Of course you do. You are the kindest and most loyal girl. He got up from his seat and, leaning on his cane, walked over to her. Yes, I want to be your wife, she blushed. Then you will soon have the best wedding ever. He went to the seat. They were no longer in their 20s, but much more, but they were both young at heart. At the wedding were invited parents. Did not forget Lucy and Selena and her husband, who were happy for her. In addition, the former mother-in-law confirmed that Jacob is very similar to John. The friends had a nice celebration. The bride and groom were happy. How are you doing with him? Is he good? Elizabeth asked her. Very good. You have no idea how caring he is, Lucy said and looked at her husband. Didn't it seem to you that he only needed you when it was bad? Her friend began to doubt again. Look, we've been through so much together. I don't think he proposed for nothing. Lucy didn't believe it. I wish it were so, Elizabeth even spat. The guests left and the young people were alone. Jacob wasn't quite well enough to do business again, so he spent a lot of time at home. So far, so good. But as he got stronger, he started to disappear from home. At first, he tried to come home every day, but it was not very convenient for him, so after a while Lucy slept alone. The girl had nothing to do. She called her friend Elizabeth. Oh, that again, you have nothing to do. She was upset for Lucy. No, everything is fine. Now he will catch up with what he missed while he was sick, and everything will fall back into place, defended her husband's wife. We'll see. Elizabeth didn't believe anything anymore. And indeed, Jacob, not 3 months later, was right at home. Lucy wondered very much what was wrong. Why are you always at home? What about your work? She wanted to know everything about the man she loved. Don't ask unnecessary questions. If I'm at home, it's necessary, he told her rudely. Lucy did not interfere. She remembered what had happened when she had interfered in the affairs of her roommate. She was pleased that they were always together, of course. Jacob didn't spend every minute with her the way his wife would have liked. Why can't I go to work? She asked her husband, bored at home. No, you won't, he said imperiously. Can I at least go to a friend to visit? She could not sit in 4 walls. No, I need you. He took her hand and sat her on his lap. That made Lucy melt. She didn't need anything else. After a short time at home, Jacob started leaving again. He could be gone for a week or more. Lucy was jealous, worried. Come and visit and we'll talk, Elizabeth urged her. And if her husband came back, she didn't want to upset him. Oh, so sit with your husband, she said, as if offended. Jacob never showed up. A day later, Lucy got a call from the hospital, her heart sinking. She pulled herself together in a minute and drove to her lover's house. He was bleeding internally. What had happened? No one would explain. Beloved, come to your senses. She sat beside his bed after the operation, but all she got in response was silence. Again, a couple weeks in hospital and then bed rest at home. Lucy was there for him. Porridge, broth, medication. She could stay up nights because Jacob wasn't feeling well. Okay, I've got errands to run. It's been a month since he got out of that hospital bed. Lucy disappeared into Jacob's room for most of her working hours. After a week, the doctor gave him permission to get up, but he couldn't do it himself, so Lucy helped him. She walked with him first around the room, then in the hallway as well. Jacob said nice things, thanked her. A month passed very quickly, and during that time the young people became friends and they said goodbye very warmly. Will we meet again? The girl didn't want to let him go. Of course, he promised and got into the car that came after him. Lucy was sad. She looked after the departing car and almost cried. How are you? Elizabeth came up behind her. Everything is fine, blinked the girl, and a tear fell treacherously on her cheek. Come on, her friend took her hand and led her back into the building. Lucy continued to stay with Elizabeth. After she told her to live as long as she wanted, she hadn't even thought about it. Now she realized she had to look for an apartment. What are you doing? You've been living for so long. You don't need to move out, began to persuade her Elizabeth when her friend told her about it. I don't know, I still feel uncomfortable. Lucy was telling the truth. It's fine, trust me. I would have told you right away, the girl assured her. Lucy waited for him, but he didn't come. It was a shame. A month passed, the second, and Roma was still not there. Enough waiting, her girlfriend pitied her. You know, I try to talk myself out of it, but I can't, Lucy told her then. Another month later, a car pulled up to the hospital. I need Lucy, A young guy ran in. Now, Elizabeth met him, went to look for her friend. Hello. The girl came out into the lobby. She was very surprised that someone was looking for her. I need you. He showed her the car. The girl's heart beat faster. She had really waited for him. She turned to her friend, who looked surprised at everything that was happening. Let's go, Lucy said confidently. They climbed into the parlor. The guy there said Jacob wasn't feeling well and he'd sent him here for her. Excitement set in. Let's go, the girl said confidently. They drove off. Elizabeth stood at the window and saw everything. She was worried about her friend because she did not say anything, where she went, where to look for her in case of emergency. What happened to him? Lucy worried in the car. You'll see, it was obvious that the guy was focused on the road. They arrived somewhere outside of town, there to a house that was surrounded by a fence. The girl got out of the car, waiting for the doors to open so she could get in. She was led into the house, escorted into a room. Jacob was in bed again. He was asleep. Hello, she said loudly to make him wake up. Lucy. He opened his eyes and mumbled her name. What happened to you? Why didn't you come? She walked over to his bed. He moaned. Now she looked at the medication that was lying here. She decided to give him a painkiller. Don't, asked the doctor. He shook his head. Where is he? She rushed to the door, stepping out into the hallway. There she was shown to a room with a man in it. Are you the doctor? She turned to him. Yes, is something wrong? He got up from his chair. He's in pain, she pointed to the wall. Now he came out of his and went into the room where Jacob was lying. He saw that one of the medicines had been set aside. I wanted to give it to him, but he wouldn't let me. He sent it to you, Lucy admitted. Do you have a medical degree? The doctor turned to her. Yes, I'm a nurse, she nodded. Good, you wanted to do the right thing. You have to trust. The last words were addressed to Jacob. Thank you, Lucy said quietly. She stayed to live in the house. She called Elizabeth, told her to write a statement for her. After that, she alerted the management, and they went along with it. She sat by the bedside of a man she really liked. Lucy didn't know why she was willing to do anything for him. She gave him compresses, turned him over, gave him shots, IVs, whatever she had to do. Thank you. He took her hand and pulled her to him. Anyone would have done the same. She tried to say something. Because her heart was pounding, she was worried about being so close to him. No, he looked into her eyes and then pulled her close and kissed her. Lucy realized she loved this man. Let's try to get up. He'd been sitting up for a while now, but the bones were shattered. They'd been put back together piece by piece, so it wasn't a given that he'd be able to do anything. Probably couldn't, he doubted. But Lucy took his hands, one placed on her shoulders. The young man managed it. He stood by the bed for only a few seconds, then sat back down. There, she was breathing hard because it was a little hard. Be careful, his wife saw him off. She, as in other years, was alone in the house. There was a different kind of joy now. The husband had hired a housekeeper, whom Lucy liked to talk to. Naomi, still have time to do everything. Let's have lunch. She invited her assistant to the table. I can't do that, she made big eyes. What's the big deal? Lucy didn't understand. They sat down at the table, talked about a lot of things, mostly about life. Naomi told about her difficult fate. So Lucy opened up to this woman. Of course, it hadn't happened the first day they met. It had been a couple years since she'd been employed there. Jacob came home very rarely, and he and his wife practically stopped communicating. Lucy would rush to meet her lover when he showed up, but he'd say he was tired and wanted to go to bed. And in the morning, he'd disappear again. Jacob, I need to talk to you. Lucy told him seriously when their marriage was 8 years old. Can you do that? He even stopped. Don't you believe it? The woman was so fed up with everything. She was kind of married and kind of not. She wanted clarity. Tell me, he exhaled impatiently. What's going on with you and me? She asked him forehead to forehead. Nothing, he smirked. That smirk of his had attracted Lucy so much before, but now it pissed her off. Jacob, I'm your wife. I've been sitting here alone for years, and you won't let me go anywhere, she cried. And you remember who you were, where I got you out of, and all you can do is look after me. I've got another family, a kid. Yes, I'm married to you, but I'm fine there. You're just a backup. He said all this to her face and left the house. What? She stood there confused. Lucy went to her room, cried a lot. Naomi came over in the evening. She wanted to talk to someone, but the woman couldn't leave the room. Her heart was breaking into pieces. Strangely enough, Jacob came the next day. He went straight to Lucy's room. He sat down on a chair. What? She didn't understand. She'd had a sleepless night, so her head wasn't thinking straight. Who were you before? How did you try to organize your life? He waited. I don't understand, she thought to herself. How could he know all this? Don't talk to the servants. He guessed what she was thinking. Understandable. She looked down at the floor. It was embarrassing if Naomi also exaggerated everything. So, did you make free love? He leaned toward her. Jacob, she didn't want to talk about it. It was a long time ago and not true. Lucy wanted to forget it all like a bad dream. Jacob, what? He jumped to his feet. It was all long before she met you. She tried to speak calmly so as not to irritate the man. Yes, and being told that my wife is an easy woman, it feels good. He grabbed her arm. It hurts me. She started to get scared. Me too. He looked at her and breathed heavily. And what are you going to do now? She couldn't think of anything, only of that grip that clenched tighter and tighter. You don't need to know that. He shoved her so hard that she fell on the bed. Lucy cried, and he gave her a look as if he'd spat at her and walked out. In the evening, Lucy thought of nothing better than to get even. She was alone, pulled a bottle of hard liquor and pills from the bar. Everything was in front of her. Why would she want this life? Everything is wrong and everything is wrong. She's only ruining things for others, her parents, her friends, her men. She poured into a glass, poured in a handful of pills. When she drank the bitter medicine, she felt immediately dizzy. Lucy knew the effects would come quickly. As she was passing out, she saw the front door open. She remembered nothing else. Lucy, she heard, her consciousness was badly clouded. For the first few seconds, she didn't realize where she was or what had happened to her. But it all came. She squeezed her eyes shut, though she hadn't opened them yet. Why couldn't she even die properly? Thank God she woke up. Elizabeth was standing over her. Jacob was beside her. What's wrong with me? Lucy realized that she hadn't gone to the other world, but it couldn't be without a trace. It's okay. Her friend stroked her head. Nothing is good. Neither are the brains in your head. What? Afraid to take more so I can come and feel sorry. He spoke in a tone that made Elizabeth want to punch him in the face. I'm sorry I didn't. Lucy closed her eyes. The man left. The friends were left alone. Tell me the truth, Lucy cried. You have pinched some nerves in your face and also in your neck, but also in general. Your body is poisoned, said her friend. Lucy couldn't think about how she looked now. She was on her way to recovery. That's when she realized what she had done. When she wanted to get a glass of water, she couldn't do it. Her fingers wouldn't listen. She'd get out of bed, but after a while, she'd get tired. On top of that, my immune system was completely weakened. Let's go. Jacob entered the room when she was discharged home. She needs help, Elizabeth said. So help her, he said in a tone that demanded no objection. They left the hospital together, Elizabeth carrying her friend in a wheelchair. Afterward, Jacob put her in the car, and they drove off. At the house, Lucy saw young people, a guy and a girl. She wondered who it could be. They rent an apartment here, he explained. What about me? She wondered. It's okay, they'll be patient, and when they get ready to buy, we'll decide. It was agreed that the young people would try to live in the private sector, and if they liked it, they would buy the house. No one warned them that the landlady would be ill, but the owner assured them that she would not interfere with them. So they did. It was so cold in the room, but Lucy was too shy to ask anyone for anything. She pulled several blankets over herself. She went out to the kitchen, ate something. The young neighbors looked at her, tried to talk, but the woman didn't meet it. Lucy, can I help you? A girl came up to her when she was going to the kitchen again. You have your own life. I don't want to disturb you, she said. Would you like to go for a walk? You're always in the house? Maria asked her. If it's not too much trouble, help me get dressed. Lucy was ashamed, but she hadn't breathed fresh air in months. Of course, Maria did as she was asked. Lucy went out of the house, told the girl that she could handle it from there, and she promised to follow her in a few minutes. It was freezing, and it was cold to be outside for long. Lucy didn't want to be followed. so she presumptuously went into the back of the lot. There she sat for a while, and when she felt herself freezing, she got up and walked back. But the woman did not calculate her strength. She slipped and fell. It is not known how much time passed while Maria was looking for her. "What are you doing? You'll catch cold." Maria found her at last. "Thank you," cried Lucy. She lay in her room, tears running down her cheeks. Already during the night, Lucy had a fever. It was hard for her to breathe, but the woman didn't call anyone. She was ashamed that she had to ask strangers for help. "Lucy, how are you feeling?" Maria came into the room. "I'm fine," she wheezed. "What are you talking about? You have a fever." She went over and touched her head. An ambulance was called and the woman was rushed to the hospital. Bilateral pulmonary edema. They put her in the ward, and then there were several weeks of treatment. Lucy had a long time to recover from this condition. Maria and Elizabeth came to visit her. "Thank you," the woman cried. Her friend offered to call her mother, but Lucy was against it. It was not easy for her. "What are you saying? Anyone would do that." She recognized herself in Maria. When she felt better, she was allowed to go home. "Jacob, hello," Maria called him. "We agreed to buy the house from you." He arrived and saw his wife lying in bed. She had lost a lot of weight and her face was distorted. "I'll leave her here and file for divorce. Don't worry, she won't live longer than a year. But for that, I'll give you a discount." He looked at the future owners of the house. "How can you do that to a person?" Maria didn't understand. "You do not know how she acted." He scheduled a meeting for tomorrow to draw up the documents and hand over the money. "How are you?" A girl came into the room in the evening. "Why did you agree to leave me here?" Lucy asked, while she thought, if it weren't for this, where would she go? She didn't want to be a burden on her mother's shoulders. "I talked to my father. He said he would help you in your treatment." Maria sat down next to the bed. She smelled of kindness. "What are you saying? I don't need anyone's help." Lucy made a face that made Maria laugh. "You do not need to know that. You are still very young. Everything will get better. And people like your husband, you just need to throw aside." Maria saw without any stories what kind of man he is. Lucy was grateful to the girl. She lay back and smiled to herself. Living so many years with a man under the same roof, he offered her money to buy things in the stores. Why did she always refuse? She should have taken it and saved. Now at least she would have a financial cushion. It's nothing. Maria looked after a woman. Her husband, Mickey, Lucy didn't see often. But when she needed his help, he was there for her. "You become like a mother to me." The girl hugged her sometimes. "You grew up without her?" The woman guessed. "Yes, she left us when I was not even 3 years old." It seemed that Maria was going to cry. "Gone somewhere or not at all?" Lucy asked cautiously. "Not at all." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry." The woman squeezed her hand. "It's okay. I don't remember her at all." The girl wiped her tears and smiled again. Lucy decided that she would try, recover, and help Maria in any way she could. But time passed and it did not get better. The cough that used to choke her was much less now. "And we have guests." Maria came to a woman's room. "Who?" The woman tensed up. More than anything else in the world, she was afraid of the arrival of her mother, that when she saw, she would not listen to anyone, just take her home. And Lucy could not afford that. "Allow me to introduce Nani." A man entered the room. He had gray hair, but he didn't look old. Jacket, pants, boots, and most of all, Lucy noticed the perfume. She knew it wasn't cheap. "Hello," she said quietly, trying to cover her face. "You know, Lucy, as much as I've heard about you, it seems like I know you personally." He walked over and shook her hand. "Why this officiousness?" "Just Lucy." She felt the redness coming to her face. "Okay then, I'm Nani." He looked at her. Rays of wrinkles diverged from his eyes, but that only adorned the man. They talked some more and then Maria invited them to the table. Lucy didn't want to go, but Nani insisted. He helped her up. The woman threw on a robe. "I'm sorry I'm like this." Lucy imagined herself, her hair tousled with graying, herself in some kind of robe. "What are you talking about? You're sick. We'll sit at the table, and then we'll get you back to bed." He walked very quietly and supported her. Maria did her best. There was nothing on the table. Everyone sat down at the table and talked a lot, including the treatment. "I can't agree to this." She looked at Nani. At that moment, she felt that he was not looking at her as a weak and sick woman. "Okay, I'll lend you the money after I can. You pay it back in installments." He tilted his head to the side, waiting for her answer. "Are you sure it will help me?" Her head was involuntarily tilted this way. "I'm 200% sure." He raised his wine glass, said something else, and drank. "I guess I'll be going." Lucy started to get up. "No, we're going for a little walk now." Nanny stood up and gave the lady a hand. "But me," she pointed to her robe again. "That's okay. Here's the coat." He pulled out of the closet. "We won't be long." They went outside, stood there for a while, both of them being silent. It was a pleasure to chat. He walked her to her room. "We didn't even talk." She smiled her crooked smile. "You know, sometimes even being quiet with someone is good." He took her hand, kissed it, and left. Lucy sat on the bed, looking at the closed door. That's why, when she had become so helpless and ugly, she had met a decent man. Not wanting to think about it, she picked up a book and started reading to ward off the bad thoughts. Maria saw Lucy off to the clinic, which her father had paid for. Elizabeth volunteered to accompany her, to be there for her if needed. "You don't realize what an amazing man he is," Lucy told her on the road. "You know, the fact that he gave money for treatment, yes, but you have to look at him." Again criticized another man, Lucy. "You can always tell at first sight," squinted her friend. "Yes, but this one doesn't seem to have any flaws." Elizabeth couldn't believe herself when she said that. They arrived at the clinic. There the women were placed in a room. Elizabeth had an extra place. The treatment began. Lucy underwent 3 surgeries in total. The doctors tried to relax her muscles. Whether it worked or not, it will be seen when the rehabilitation course is over. "Elizabeth, help," Lucy asked. It was not easy for her. Her face was in bandages. She couldn't even drink properly. "Now call right away. That's what I came here for." She jumped up from her seat. "You know, I thought I'd call my mother," Lucy said one night. "Don't you think it would be a shock to her? She's not a girl anymore." Elizabeth was worried about Betty. "I don't know, but for some reason I feel like doing it now." Lucy wanted to cry, but the doctor said she should do it less often. "Well, let's wait a couple more days, or in general, discharged and go straight to her," offered options Elizabeth. "Soon, you'll find out. Just wait a bit." He drove on. The car stopped outside the restaurant. The man got out, opened the door on Lucy's side, held her out. Mickey and Maria were waiting for them on the porch. "Daddy," the girl wanted to say something, but the man put his finger to his lips. "Why are you all like this?" Lucy looked at Mickey, who seemed as confused as she was. They walked to the lounge and sat down at a table. "Lucy, when Maria started telling me about you, you reminded me of a woman. I couldn't believe it until I saw you." He put a photograph on the table. Lucy took it. There was a young woman who looked just like her. She was wearing the same blue dress at the time it was taken, and her hair was the same. "I mean, you turned me into her." It was a little uncomfortable. "No, it was just love at first word. Not even a look." Tears appeared in Nanny's eyes again. "I like you too." The woman told the truth. "Then let's drink to that." They all raised their glasses, except Maria. "What are you doing?" Her father looked at her. "I can't." She looked at her husband. "What? I'm going to be a grandfather?" Nanny was happy. "Yes." She looked at Lucy. "And you, a grandmother, if you agree." Of course I would agree. The atmosphere was very familial. They had a wonderful evening. After that, they got into their cars and drove home. When they stopped at one of the intersections, Lucy noticed a familiar silhouette in the car next to her. It was Jacob, and as soon as he felt someone looking at him, he turned around. The woman smiled. She could see the man's face start to turn white when he saw her in the nice car, next to the imposing man beside her. "Will you marry me?" Nanny asked her at that moment. "Yes," she smiled. She had finally found the happiness she had been searching for all of her life. "Okay, as always, your take." Smiling was also contraindicated for now. Lucy studied hard. She didn't want Nanny's money to go to waste. She did everything the doctor said. Finally, it was time to remove the bandages. Lucy looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe it. Yes, her head was slightly tilted to the side, but now only she noticed it, and most importantly, she could control it. But the distortion of facial expressions wasn't what it used to be, especially since the surgeon had said that as she practiced daily, it would go away completely. I can't believe it. She looked at her friend. And he did it. Everyone wanted only to cripple you, but he cured you. Elizabeth raised a finger up. It was necessary to stay here a little longer. Elizabeth was told that Lucy no longer needed an escort. She had to go home. What a pity that you and I are not back together, the friends hugged. Come, let's go to mine, reminded Lucy of her friend's promise. I will. She kissed her on the cheek and left. Lucy had time to think. After all the treatments and everything else, she would lie on the bed or sit by the window and look out there. There were only good thoughts in her head. She thought that even as she left Mickey and Maria, she would never forget them. When the girl gives birth, she could stay with her grandchildren. The door opened a little. Yes, Lucy wondered. No one had come to see her at this time already. She looked around, saw Nanny. Madama, he spread his arms to embrace the woman. I think you're flattering me a little. She stood up and walked towards him. No, I never lied to anyone, nor do I say flattering words. The man hugged Lucy, and then they sat down right there in the ward. I'm glad of that fact. She looked at him. He was handsome. Lucy began to imagine what he must have been like when he was younger. He must have had a lot of girls. Listen, you're being discharged in a couple of days. I want to pick you up myself and surprise you. He didn't say what. Okay. She didn't understand why she needed permission for that. Promise that I'll do everything the way I want, and if you don't like it, you'll fix it, he said, and then didn't look her in the eye. For what you've already done to me, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life. She pointed at her face. Deal. Then he took her hand as he always did, kissed it, and left the room. It was nice to be cared for by someone other than yourself. Lucy waited to be discharged, and it came, just like Nanny had said. 2 days later. Hey, he was alone. I thought Maria would be with you. The woman was surprised. Let's go. Remember, I promised you a surprise. The man reminded her. Yes, I'm very curious what it will be. She got into the car. First in line was the beauty parlor. Why? She turned to him. She realized she didn't look good, but she could do it herself. But later, quietly, he put a finger to his lips. You promised. Lucy went. Nanny waited patiently in the car. Her hair was colored, styled. The woman Nines looked immediately younger. After that, a little makeup. She walked to the car. She felt like she had been transformed into a queen. Beautiful. Nanny couldn't help but compliment her. Where to now? She turned to him. To the store, the man said confidently. You're so crazy. She shook her head. You'll understand everything later. He spoke in riddles. Several dresses were already ready to be tried on when Lucy went in there. She wore them all. They were all gorgeous. But she chose one, the blue one. She liked that color so much. As she walked to the car, Nanny almost cried. What's going on with you? She couldn't understand.
Larry, hi. Wait, she heard a shout from behind her. She looked back and Vincent was running after her. He lived here too, so they knew each other. She waited for him, and when he caught up with her, he walked beside her. Where are you from? Wondered the girl. What are you doing out so late? It's already dark here, he asked her. I'll do what I want for you, she said proudly, and walked on. Vincent had been following her all this time. He just liked the girl and wanted to walk her home. When her house came into view, Vincent took her hand, turned her around, and looked into her eyes. Larry, how can you not realize that I love you? He mumbled to her. Oh, leave me alone. Soon I'll finish school, go to the city, and find a good fiancé. He'll have an apartment, a car, money, and he'll take me on vacations to the sea, Larry said dreamily. Is it because I don't have money that I'm worse? Vincent asked her. I'm not saying who is worse or better. I'm just saying that I don't want to marry a country boy. I'll go to the city. And then I'll have everything. The girl looked at him and didn't want to talk anymore. So does that mean it's over? He asked her. Did we have a beginning? She didn't understand. You've always been good to me. We used to dance at discos. At school, we talked a lot. I thought you liked me. That's why I was running, Vincent told her. What were you thinking? Larry didn't understand. She liked him, yes, but just as a friend. She could go anywhere with him, knew he'd stand up for her, but she'd never planned for him to think they were together. Vincent tilted his head. He didn't want to talk to the girl anymore. He'd really thought she liked him, but it turned out she had other plans. To go into town, to meet some rich daddy, and maybe stay there with him. He didn't even look at her, just turned around and walked away. "Bye, Vincent," she said after him. But the young man didn't even look back. He walked on, tears dripping from his eyes. He couldn't let anyone look at someone like him right now. Vincent just wanted to go home, lie on his bed, and do nothing else. Larry stood there for a moment. She shrugged her shoulders, turned toward her house, and walked there quickly. "Larry, where are you walking?" her mother asked as she entered the house. "Mom, I'm an adult. Stop lecturing me," Larry said, and went to her room. She's grown up, of course. As soon as she asks for money, so Mommy give it, Daddy give it, and as soon as she's been somewhere else, she's grown up, said the woman, resenting the way her daughter was talking to her. But no one could do anything, and so everyone kept silent. Mom knew that if she started being rude to Larry now, they'd have a fight, and then the girl would just pack up and leave, and no one wanted that. So they all went to bed. In the morning, it would be a different conversation. Larry was going to school. She went there every day. The girl didn't study very well, but she did well, and that pleased her parents. Now, when she was going to enroll, her mother told her more than once that she had to study to get a good score. But Larry didn't care about that. Well, if her daughter didn't need it, her mother didn't need her to go to school, because she could count, write, read, what else was needed for a child. And when the exams were over, the boys stood in the yard. They were preparing to receive their certificates. The next day, they had to go to the city to submit their documents. Larry dreamed of entering the institute to study economics. She had all the potential for it. She always got good grades in math. And now she and her mom were on the bus to the train station. "Larry, are you sure you've chosen the profession you want?" her mother asked her. "Of course, I've been coming to this for a long time. And I'm not going to give up on the idea now," Larry said. Her mother was not against it, although they were entering college, but it was a good one, so the woman had no doubt that her daughter would graduate from this educational institution and later become a good specialist. They arrived. The admission committee filled out all the documents. Luda was left here because she had to take some preparatory courses to know better what would be on the exams. The girl immediately fluffed up her tail, because she came here not only to enroll, but also to find a man with whom she could build a future life. But as they say, you can't escape fate, and Larry saw her acquaintance in a cafe on the third day. "Vincent, hi, what are you doing here?" She came up to him. "Probably the same thing you did, coming to enroll," he told her. Vincent was still resentful inside for what Larry had said to him back in the village. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk to her. "Well, are you still upset with me?" She didn't understand. "No, I'm not offended. It's just that I opened my soul to you and you spit in it," he told her. "Listen, where did you go to school?" Larry asked him, just curious. "Law school," he looked at her. "Oh, I remember you always wanted to do that," Larry told him. Then she sat down at his table, because she couldn't sit here alone, and called the waiter over to her. He took her order. Now Larry sat silently, looking at Vincent and waiting for her order to arrive. She felt so happy, but she realized that she would have to go back to the village after she got here to bring her things back. They sat there for a few hours today, and then Vincent started talking to Larry. They discussed many things, and it seemed to her that maybe she would start dating Vova, because he said he liked her. In the evening, the young man walked the girl to the dormitory, and then they met more than once. "Larry, are we going out tonight?" Vincent asked her when he came to her again. "Well, let's go," the girl agreed. If before she didn't want to communicate with him, now, in another city, she was even somehow proud of the fact that she was dating a guy, and no one else had time to get acquainted with anyone. Vincent had some money, so he took the girl to cafes, movie theaters, and other places. That flattered Larry. She wondered why she hadn't paid any attention to him in the village. It wasn't so bad now that they were students. Vincent came over, gave her gifts. The girls were jealous of Larry, and she was better for it. One day, when she was graduating from college, Vincent asked her to marry him. "Will you marry me?" He looked at her. Of course, they held hands. The very next day, Vincent and Larry went to the registry office and filed the application. "I don't understand why I didn't want to hang out with you before," the girl said. "And I don't understand it either. I'm promising, I'm studying, I'll graduate soon, I'll have a profession," he said, and shrugged. Larry was glad of that, because she knew that if Vincent decided to do something, he would do it. "My parents were informed, and they insisted on registering at the city registry office, and then coming to the village and celebrating the wedding there. After all, it was in the village that all the acquaintances, friends, and relatives lived." The young people did not argue, because there was a lot of fun, and after they said yes at the registry office, took the marriage certificate and went to the village. The parents had done a great job. They had set up tables right outside, a lot of guests had come, and now Vincent and Larry were sitting at the head of the table, and they were very happy. Well, young people, bitter. One of the guests stood up and raised his glass. The young people kissed. Everything was fine. "Larry, what have you decided about where you're going to live after the wedding?" her mom asked her tonight. Of course, in the city. Where else? Vincent still had 2 more years of school. "We'll get an apartment and live there," Larry told her, because she didn't see any other options. "Good, I am happy for you. If you need money, just ask, and my father and I will definitely help you," said the mother, and hugged her daughter. Larry was glad to hear this, for she had no job yet, and Vincent had only a scholarship, and that was just an ordinary one. After a week in the village, they went to the city. Larry had to look for a job, and Vincent was not idle. He decided that his studies were taking up a lot of his time, but he had to get a job. Larry had no trouble getting a job in the education department, in the economics department. At first, she was just an intern. She was put on probation, and then she became like everyone else. She closed out statements, did payroll, and other things. Vincent went back to school in September. He couldn't find a job except at a cafe where he'd been offered a job as a waiter. But Larry urged him to take it, because every penny counted. Vincent didn't refuse, and as winter approached, he went to work. It was a penniless salary, hers and his, but it was enough to pay the rent and buy a month's worth of groceries. "We'll be fine," Larry told him, and hugged him. Everything was really fine in the family until the girl felt sick. "What is the matter with you?" Vincent looked at his wife and saw how pale she was. "Vince, I think you're going to be a daddy soon," the girl looked at him playfully. "Okay, Daddy, so Daddy, I'm very happy about it," he said. After that, the girl really found out that she was pregnant. And it began constantly in the morning: nausea, backache, it was impossible to walk. She barely made it to her maternity leave, and when she went into it, she just laid down on the DVJ and didn't get up. "Why are you always lying on the bed?" her husband used to say to her. He was just annoyed by it. "Try it, walk," she told him in return. But Vincent didn't care about that. He was in his last year, and now he had to prepare not only for the session, but also for his final exams and to write his diploma. He had to quit his job because he didn't have enough time for everything. And now there was practically no money in the family. I had to constantly call my parents for help. Finally, the long-awaited day came when Larry was due to give birth. It had been a long and slow process. The pain that overcame the girl was unrelenting. Larry screamed, the doctors soothed, but it had to be done. Finally, when everyone heard the baby scream, Larry exhaled and realized that she would never give birth again. "Congratulations on your baby, girl." A midwife came up to her with packages in her hands. "Let me see her," said Larry. And when the girl was placed beside her, she couldn't be glad that the little lump she had just given birth to was lying next to her. Both mother and child were doing well. Vincent came to pick them up a few days later. After that, they registered the baby. And now Larry's life was even more complicated than it had been before. The formula, the diapers, all of it was a struggle. Vincent didn't help because he was always busy, even though Larry asked him to. It was like a black cat had come between husband and wife. They started fighting all the time, but by the time Evie had to go to kindergarten and Larry had to go to work, things seemed to have settled down. Things went back to normal between the couple, but it didn't last long. "Can you take Evie to daycare today?" Larry asked her husband. "Why, you're going to work anyway," he told her. You understand, she wanted to tell him that she had to get ready, iron everything, do her hair, wash her hair. But she didn't say any of that, because she saw that he wouldn't take anyone to kindergarten. Then Larry would dress the girl and they would go. Vincent delved deeper into the fact that he was looking for a job. Every day he went somewhere, made phone calls, put on suits, went for interviews, but nothing worked out. Somewhere they wouldn't hire just because he didn't have experience and seniority. There the pay was small. There only as an intern. Well, what did you want? That you'd come in and they'd tell you right away, would you like to be a judge or a prosecutor? Larry used to tell him. It seemed to Vincent now that she was no longer the Larry he'd once loved. She'd been so jaded over the years that she'd gone from a beautiful girl to a gem. It was only going to get worse from here. Vincent got a job somewhere, a law firm. He did as he was told. Of course, he didn't like anything, but he put up with it, walking around, thinking he'd be promoted soon. Why did you take the job here? Because there were plenty of offers just like it. Larry asked him. Look, don't distract me, please, he told her as he sat at his desk, going through some papers. Okay, his wife pulled away from him. She realized that their relationship was not working out at all lately, so she made the only decision that seemed right to her now, which was to divorce him. When Evie was in second grade, Larry first talked about divorce. She didn't want to change anything, but she had no other choice, so she told Vincent that they had to get a divorce. He looked at her perplexed at first, then got up from the table and walked silently into the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water, drank it, and turned to Larry again. Are you sure you mean what you say? He asked her. Absolutely, she answered him. Okay, then go apply tomorrow. I don't think there'll be any problems. We have no assets in common. The daughter, I understand, will stay with you, and everything else. He grinned, looked around, and realized that there was nothing else. Just as Vincent had said, the next day Larry filed for divorce. She didn't want to live like that anymore. She didn't get much, but she and her daughter would have enough for the two of them. Vincent didn't wait for the divorce to go through. He packed up his things and went wherever the hell he wanted to go. And that you won't even regret the job you worked, his wife asked him as he packed his things. I've been working there for several years now. I work like a horse, but I don't get anything out of it, he told her. I've been working there for a few years now. I work like a horse, but I get nothing, he told her. He threw down his bag, looked at his wife again, hugged his daughter, and left the apartment. The first thing he did was to go to the train station. He had to see if there were tickets, where they were going, and what he would do where he would go. There were very few tickets. And when the woman cashier told him that there were several tickets to one of the cities he had once dreamed of, Vincent did not hesitate to buy one of those all tickets. Now he sat in the compartment, looking out the window and mentally saying goodbye to this city, realizing that he would never come back here again. His mother and father were waiting for him at home, but he decided not to go to them. He called to say he was fine. They divorced Larry, but the daughter also did not stop communicating with him, her grandmother and grandfather. And when Evie asked her mom at home where her dad was, her mom told her that he had died. What do you mean, he's dead? The girl didn't understand. Well, just like that, when a person is gone and will never be again, her mother used to explain to her. Evie didn't understand it because one buries the dead, and she hadn't buried her father. From that moment on, Larry began a life of debauchery. She had set herself a plan to find a husband to provide for her and her daughter, and now she had to fulfill that plan. She went to work, bought herself different outfits, was very showy, constantly wearing makeup, styling her hair, bringing home different men. Evie saw it all. She didn't like it at first. But when she was in the 6th grade, she looked up to her mother and started doing things too. At first, the girl got into a bad company where her friend brought her. The guys that were older than the girls by several years, they could do there what was forbidden: smoking, drinking, kissing. But when the girl came home, no one controlled her there. She could go to her room without hindrance and go to bed. The mother noticed that something was wrong with her daughter, but did not say anything to her because she really did not catch her daughter by the hand. And that's all Evie wanted. In 8th grade, the girl went wild. The first time Evie had close contact with a young man. She didn't say that she was very upset, but she wasn't happy either, She just didn't understand what the big deal was. The girl returned home. She went to bed. At night, she dreamed about some murk. Everything was scary. Everything was black all around. Some blood, something else. She didn't understand what the dream meant. She woke up in the morning. Her mother still wasn't home. It didn't really stress the girl out because she knew that her mom might not come through, and for 2 days she would be late at work. She would go somewhere on those days, and now that Evie realized that she was doing whatever she wanted with impunity. Sometimes her mother came and said something to her, read some lectures, but Evie didn't want to listen to her because first of all it was late and secondly it wasn't interesting. And what was the point of all these lectures if she could see a living example in front of her? Over the years her father might have called her, but her mother didn't pick up the phone, so the girl thought Vincent didn't communicate with her. She never believed he was dead. The girl did not say anything to anyone. She was fine, but this is at first glance. But if the girl was shown to a psychologist, he would certainly say that a child in the 8th grade would not drink and smoke. In any case, he pours out some of his unhappiness or grief. Of course, no one could tell Larry that, so she didn't think it was a good thing, but she didn't say anything. One day the daughter came home and immediately went into her mother's room. "I need to talk to you," she told her. "All right, come on in and we'll talk," Larry agreed. She was sitting there painting her nails. "Mom, I think I'm expecting a baby," her daughter told her. "What makes you think that?" She was staring at her. "Well, first of all, I'm 2 months late. Secondly, I'm nauseous and all the signs that I'm pregnant," the girl told her. The mother quickly called someone. They went to the hospital, even though it was already evening, but no one refused them because everyone knew each other. And after the girl was checked, it turned out that she was indeed expecting a child. And she already had not 1, and not even 2 months. "Okay, don't make any plans," Larry told her. "Why?" The girl didn't understand. "We'll probably have an abortion for you in a couple of days," she said, while she wondered how it could have happened. Then she grinned to herself and realized that with her lifestyle, anything could have happened without anyone noticing. Larry's eyes were on her daughter now, watching her all the time, watching what she was doing and how she was doing it. So when a few days had passed, she told Evie that they had to go to the hospital. The time was set for later, so that no one would know about anything and the girls would get there. "Mom, why at night?" her daughter asked her. "Do you have any idea why at night?" she asked her. They came in, Evie was put in a special chair, anesthesia was put in, and everything was done. And after she came to, the girl just cried. "Why are you crying now? You should have cried earlier," her mother told her. "Mom, don't you think you did a bad thing?" Evie told her she realized she had done it all herself, of course, but she didn't want to blame herself. "Don't you think you did the deed? I offered it to you. You didn't refuse. That was the end of it." They never brought up the subject again. But from that moment on, Evie became very distant from her mother. If earlier she wanted to finish 11 grades and then go somewhere else, now she had definitely decided that now, when 9th grade was coming to an end, she would not go any further. Evie had even already chosen the school she would be applying to and was determined to go there. She studied hard, but she was still good at some things, and some things she wasn't. Her mother tried to help her, but Evie refused any help. In the spring, Evie asked her mother about her father and why he didn't talk to them. She didn't answer, just waved her hand. The girl realized that her mother knew something and decided to find her phone number or something else to contact her father. And indeed, she found his phone number, called. Vincent was very happy because all these years, until they lived together, he called Larry almost every month, asking to get his daughter on the phone, but she didn't do it. No one knew why, whether out of jealousy or principle, but now that Evie had the digits of her father's number in her hand, she went to the phone and dialed his number. "Hello, Dad." "Hi," she said when she heard the phone answered. "Evie, is that you?" he asked her. "Yes, I am," she answered him, and she was very glad that now she was talking to a man whom she had once loved very much. She wanted to meet him very much, but it turned out to be impossible, because her father was in another city. ... That's it, he told her about it. "Dad, this is the city I'm going to go to," she told him. "Come on, is it true?" he asked her. Of course I would deceive you. Then, when I arrive, I'll meet you, and I'll tell you everything the girl told him. Okay, then I'll wait for you. When are you going to come, in June or later? He asked her. I think that in June we will have graduation, and when we pass all the exams, only then I can come to you, the girl told him. All right, I'll meet you, but be sure to let me know when and on what train you'll be leaving, he asked her. Of course, I'll let you know. Evie was so glad she had contacted her father, and now she thought things must be changing for her. The girl began to study a little better, because she was afraid that suddenly it would happen and she wouldn't be able to pass the exams, which meant that she would stay for the fall, and she could forget about admission. Now in her diary began to appear 4s and even 5s, but it was too early to rejoice. It was necessary to study until the end of the year, and then to look and think about what would happen next. And so, the exams were chosen. She was preparing for them, studying tickets and everything else. There were only a few days left until graduation. Evie was sure that she had passed everything. Now she just had to wait for the results. And when it was announced that she had passed everything, she couldn't help but rejoice. She didn't want to get ready for graduation, because Evie didn't like anyone in her class. The friends she'd been hanging out with recently were no longer friends. All she could think about now was getting her diploma and going to school. When the coveted paper was in her hands, she ordered tickets and only had to tell her mother that she was leaving, and everything else was unimportant. Evie realized that if she left now and lived there with her father, she would be better off than she was here. Mom, I've already booked my tickets and I'll be enrolling in a few days, Evie told her, and she stood there smiling as if she had won the lottery. Why didn't you tell me? Larry glared at her angrily. She'd kept her daughter from her father for so long that she could just tell him she was going to him. Mom, but you have your own life here. You're looking for a companion, so keep looking for him. And I'll be calmer there with Dad, the girl said. With Daddy? Larry questioned her then, shocked that her daughter had forgotten everything so easily. Yeah, with my dad. He lives in the same city where I am going to enroll. He promised he would meet me, and now that I'm coming, I think he and I will have a good relationship, the daughter told her mother, realizing that she was now pissing her off. Don't you think, the woman asked her, but didn't finish. What don't I think? Evie looked at her and smiled cheekily. That he'd leave you like he'd left us, Larry asked. She was angry with Vincent, so she wasn't having fun right now. Mom, he didn't leave us. You told him you wanted a divorce, and he agreed to let you go and file for divorce. You think if I was 8 or 9 years old? I don't remember that. Stood there and looked at her daughter. Okay, if you want, go. I will not keep you, but it will be bad. Call me again. Come running to me, the woman told her, and that was the end of their conversation. Evie waited for her mother to leave the house. She dialed her father's number and, when he answered, told him which train she would be taking, on which day, and where she would be arriving. Evie, I'm so glad we're going to meet. You have no idea, Vincent told her. Dad, I'm looking forward to this meeting too, she told him with confidence. And now the girl is already on the train. She is going on the route where she intended to go, and she knows that her own father is meeting her at the station. The girl on the way was reading different magazines, looking at pictures. She was not very interested in the ride, so when it got dark, she made up her bed and decided to get some sleep. Already in the morning, she felt that someone was pushing her. She saw that it was the conductor, who told her it was time to get off. From home, when she had called, and then when she had talked to her father, she hadn't felt this way. There was a calmness. But now she was getting the jitters. What she'd say to him, what they'd talk about. It had been so long since they'd seen each other that she had no idea what she would say. Evie thought at first that she wouldn't recognize the man who had left them years ago. But when she stepped onto the platform, looked around, saw him and smiled, that she was able to recognize Vincent immediately. He, too, saw the girl looking at him. She looked a lot like her mother, so he went straight to her. Hi, Daddy, she said to him. Hello, my dear, he hugged her, took her suitcase, and led her to the car. Wow, you turned around, she glared at him. Yes, you see, I came here, met a man, and he told me that he could help me find a job. And now, As you can see, he kept his promise, my father said. Yes, I see you're doing well, the girl mumbled. So now we'll go to my place, then we'll talk. And when you go to enroll further, we'll solve the issues in a different way. Evie stared at the man. She remembered what her father had been like. And now he was about the same, but different. Talked differently, businesslike, and everything else about him had changed too. She understood that a great deal of time had passed, but how a person could change almost completely in such a time, she could not realize. They arrived at the apartment. It was a spacious one-bedroom apartment, furnished with nice furniture, a TV, some kind of systems. Everything here was for living. The kitchen had a range. Everything was beautiful. Wow, you've turned around. Is it yours or do you rent? Evie asked about the apartment. Of course it's mine, said Vincent. Cool, the girl showed the class. I don't know whether your mother told you or not, but if I set a goal for myself, I will definitely achieve it. He put some papers on the table, sat down, and looked at his daughter. She walked over, sat down opposite him, and looked at him too. So, tell me, how have you been living all these years? Why didn't you want to talk to me? He asked her. I didn't even know you called, Evie said. She was hurt that her mother was doing this to her. She didn't want her daughter to talk to her father and do it behind her back. I see, I thought so for some reason, Vincent said, and then stood up, put the kettle on, and opened the fridge. What do you do for a living? His daughter asked him. I'm working at the court now. I think I'll be in charge there soon, he smiled. I see, she shook her head, flattered that her father held such a high-ranking position, but that wasn't the point of the conversation. After her father and Evie drank tea and had a snack, they began to talk about the girl's further enrollment. When are you going to go to college? Her father asked her. Daddy, can I go to school tomorrow instead of today? Because the road is so exhausting that I just want to sleep, she said. Yes, of course, what questions? There's still the whole summer ahead. He was not against it. After that, the girl went to her room, took apart her DVJ. Her father gave her a pillow, a blanket, and she just went to sleep. Turns out her body was so tired that Evie slept practically all day. She only woke up when her father came home in the evening. She was glad that now no one was telling her anything, and she was doing whatever she wanted to do on her own. Vincent looked at his daughter, and he couldn't believe that now they were together again. He was willing to do anything for her. If Larry wouldn't let her go out with him before, he had full authority over this girl now. Evie, come to dinner, he called her into the kitchen. The girl came in. She was still sleepy, but she sat down at the table and began to eat what her father had prepared. This is delicious, she said as she tasted one bite. Yes, I tried to do that for you. He pointed with his eyes at the delivery boxes that lay under the sink. Oh, I see how you made it, she laughed, because she wouldn't have guessed it herself. The father and daughter had an easy relationship, so the next day when Evie went to enroll, she applied. She waited until the day of the exams, took them all, and a few weeks later she found out that she was on the admission list. Wow, even for free, her father looked at her. Well, what did you want? I may not behave the way you want me to, but I have enough here. She tapped her finger on her head. I see, so where do you want to live? With me or apart, he asked her. Well, of course I would like an apartment, at least a one-room apartment. Then everything will be as it should be, said the girl. Okay then, in a few weeks I'll get you an apartment, and you can live there, Vincent told her. Evie didn't mind that at all. She was even a little glad that her father was making such a concession for her. And when the apartment was found, my father called the landlord. He did everything he could. Vincent paid a year's rent in advance, so he wouldn't have to run around every month and pay. Evie was staying with him now, in the apartment his father had rented, and they were doing some minor cosmetic repairs. Are you sure you can do this alone? Her father asked her. Of course I'm sure. Why would I spoil your life? You're still young and handsome. You'll find yourself a woman, and you'll live together, she told him. Okay, did not argue with her father, because he was afraid of losing his favorite girl again, as it had happened once before. And after Evie moved out, he often came to visit her. She went to visit him. Their communication was like that of very good friends. Evie started studying. At first it was like she even liked it. At first she didn't go out anywhere. She didn't know anyone. But after she met her friends at school, she began to call them all home. One day after New Year's Eve, Vincent got a call from the school. "Hello, your daughter wasn't at school today," he was told, and he couldn't let it pass his ears. "Yeah, okay, I'll take care of it," Vincent answered quickly. He was about to hang up. Wait, not only hasn't she been today, but all of the previous week, the handler told him. You could hear that her voice wasn't as kind as it usually was. Wow, that's a separate dwelling. The man marveled at the time. He dialed Evie's number. She didn't answer for a long time, but when she did, he started to tell her off. "And what's that going on?" he asked her. "Dad, what are you talking about?" She didn't understand. "I just got a call from the school saying you've been skipping classes all last week," he mumbled to her, trying to make his voice rougher. "Listen, who are you listening to? There's nothing to do there. I've prepared everything, I got a credit. And that's it. Let's say I took a sick leave," his daughter asked him. "No sick days. Either you move in with me or you act like a decent girl," he told her. "That's it. I hear you dropped the call to Evie." After that, he got calls from neighbors, teachers from the institution, but there was nothing he could do. Evie was behaving the way she liked. Different personalities were now showing up at the apartment. She tried to attend school because her father had set a condition: either study and an apartment, or no study and nothing else. So Evie woke up in the morning, even through force, washed up, changed her clothes, and went to study. It was not difficult to study. It was just lazy to get up and go there early in the morning. One day, some company came to her house. There was one guy she didn't know. She didn't know the others. She didn't want to let them in, but when they exchanged a few words, everything went well. After that, Evie started hanging out with Murphy, who was in this company. At first he went home every night, but one day he just stayed overnight. "Aren't you going home at all?" Evie asked him. It was the summer session, so she knew she had to prepare. "Why, do you feel sorry for the bed?" He smiled back. "No, I'm sorry, but you can't just do that. You have to go home sometime anyway," she told him. No pity, then, and don't talk about it, he moved over to her and hugged her. The girl had gone down the crooked path again with the guys from the unfamiliar company she had started using, and now it was just like it had been back then at school. "Tell me, what does your father do for a living that he can afford such a thing?" Murphy asked the girl one day. "I don't know. Something to do in court," she replied, because she really didn't get involved in her father's business. "I see," the young man answered her then, and they never returned to the subject again. When a young man wanted to earn money, his friends offered him an easy option. He refused at first, but then agreed. He had to take some small packets from them and sell them to others. He did it wherever he could. He went to school, high school, college, institutes, everywhere. When he thought of punishment, he immediately thought of his girlfriend's father, and believed that if something happened, she would ask for it, and he would get him off. But it couldn't go on like that for long. So Evie put Murphy at the table one night. She set the table. They were going to have dinner, and the girl started telling Murphy that he was doing a bad thing by doing this. Because he wasn't really making money, he was just poisoning young people. Murphy didn't contradict her. He realized what he was doing, but he didn't want to give it up because the money was really not bad and they could live on it. For a while, Evie didn't know how to influence Murphy, so she decided to talk to her father about it. Yes, it was risky, but there was nothing left to do, because if he was arrested, he wouldn't keep quiet, and he would tell what she knew about her, and didn't say anything to anyone. "Dad," hi, she called to her parent. Of course, the girl didn't know where to start the conversation. "Oh, daughter, hi, how are you?" Vincent said. She didn't call that often, so the man now wanted to keep her on the phone longer. "I need to meet you and talk to you," she told him. "Okay. I don't mind. Where and when?" he asked her. "Let's meet at the cafe near my house," Evie mumbled. She didn't feel like going anywhere. "Okay," Vincent answered. He didn't mind sitting with his daughter for an hour or two, and it didn't matter what kind of conversation she was having. When the daughter and father met, she began to tell him what Murphy was doing. Her father shook his head. He understood, rubbed his napkin in his hands, and sighed. "Dad, why are you sighing? Give me some advice," his daughter asked him, because she had no one else to ask. "And what can I advise you? It's a legal case. And now that you've told me about it, I realize that after the promotion that's coming, I'll probably be the judge," he told her. "What am I supposed to do? He's a good guy. But this case is ruining everything," Evie almost cried. "Of course I'll meet your Murphy, but don't expect anything good to come of it," the father said very sternly, not how he envisioned his meeting with his daughter. The girl looked at him, and now she too thought that she had told her father everything for nothing. She got up from the table and went to the exit. "We're done talking." Vincent threw his napkin on the table, finished his coffee, and rose from his seat. It had been a few days. Evie had already passed her summer session. Everyone was on vacation now. Her father called her, told her that Murphy had an appointment today, and she was happy, but she didn't know what that would mean. "Murphy, hello." Vincent saw the young man enter the cafe. It was the same cafe where he and Evie had met. "Hello." He approached the table and crumpled, not knowing what to do for a long time. "Tell me, what's going on in your life?" the man asked him. "And what happens in it?" "Nothing special. We live," shrugged the young man. "It's understandable that you live. How do you live? Good, bad, or okay?" Vincent looked down on Murphy. "Just like all the other young people live," he mumbled to him. The guy was generally uncomfortable sitting here talking about all this. "Well, tell me how all the other people live," Vincent wondered. "I do something, get money, and then..." "Well, I think you know what they do then." Murphy stood there looking at him. "Of course I know what they then do." "And how do they make that money?" Vincent asked, because he was interested in hearing it from someone else's mouth, not his own head. The young man realized that he was about to be asked questions again. "It's what you do for a living." Murphy realized what Vincent was implying. "So you can't make any more money than that?" Vincent tried to get the young man to come clean. "What did she say to you?" Stood looking at him, Murphy waiting for the man to tell him something. "She didn't tell me anything." Vincent sighed, realizing that this guy wasn't as simple as he wanted to make it seem, and now he needed to get him to talk more, which he wasn't going to do. "Okay, I hear you," Murphy told him, and he wanted to go, but Vincent wouldn't let him. He wanted to slow him down at all costs. "Wait," he shouted at him. "What else?" Murphy turned and looked at him the way only enemies are looked at. "Understand me, I am not your enemy. Even if I tell you something now, it is only for your own good. Do you want to end up in a damp room somewhere, behind bars, with who knows what happening to you?" Vincent asked him, because he knew what they did to people like that. "No, I don't," Murphy answered him. And it was true, for he didn't do much of anything. "So get a grip on your head." The young man listened to him, said nothing in response, just turned around and walked towards the exit. He had other plans now. He was angry at the girl, why she had told all this. And to whom? Her father. How could she tell that man about him? After all, he could report him to someone. But nothing. He would talk to her, and then Evie would understand. Now Murphy needed to think of a plan that didn't involve him as the main character, but as a secondary character. He came home and didn't answer his phone for a couple of weeks, and then, as if nothing had happened, he went back to Evie's house. "Hi," he said to her as if he had just gone out for bread 5 minutes ago. "Hey, where have you been so long?" She looked at him and couldn't understand what had happened. "Nowhere. It was business. I had to prepare for everything," he answered her, while he stood and watched her reaction. "What have you been preparing for? You don't work anywhere. You don't study, you don't do anything." She was amused. "Evie, what if we had a party here?" he asked her, because he wanted to have some fun. "Of course I don't mind." She wondered why he was asking about it now, because he'd never mentioned it before. "We'll have a party, call some friends, and then..." "I don't know." He fell silent and smiled. They walked to the kitchen. Evie had just made lunch. Murphy sat looking at her, thinking about what kind of plan to make, although he already had one, but a very cruel one. Of course, Evie suspected nothing. She cooked quietly, put it on his plate, then put the bread and everything else in front of him. She was ready for any conversation now. "So Friday we'll invite some friends over and rock out, right?" Murphy looked at her, waiting for approval. "Of course we will," the girl smiled. She was so glad he was back. She could take any offer now. And since his mood was cheerful, she thought, his father hadn't said anything bad to him, and they had just talked. Now Murphy didn't know how to make sure Evie didn't guess anything. On Friday, as planned, they had invited a lot of guests, some of whom the girl had just seen for the first time. Evie's college acquaintances and Murphy's friends were here. Many of them Evie knew, but still not all of them. The girl was cutting up some appetizers. Murphy was making alcohol. He liked different cocktails, so they had bought everything they needed for that. In the evening, they turned the music up loud, danced, sang songs with the singers coming from the speakers. Everything was fun and great. Evie could see that Murphy had stopped doing something bad. It made her feel happier. It had been so many days, and she hadn't even once noticed him with anything. That couldn't help but make her glad either. And now, with some more friends staying over at night, Evie felt very dizzy. She went and lay down, unsuspecting. The next day everyone was gone, but there were still some left. Evie wanted to clean up, but Murphy offered her another cocktail. "Come on, we'll clean up tomorrow. I'll help you," he waved his hand at her. "Okay, we'll clean up," she said, and took the cocktail from the boy's hands. But because the music was loud for the second day in a row, the neighbors must have called his father. Not a couple hours later, Vincent was outside the apartment. He knocked on the door, stood and waited. "Who's there?" Evie came to the door. She didn't know when she'd started asking. "Open up, it's your father," he said sternly, because he couldn't stand it anymore. Evie opened the door, and of course everything shook inside her. She didn't know what to think. She wasn't in the right state of mind anymore. Her father picked up some friends who were still here. He just threw them out of the apartment. After that, shoveling the piles, he went into the kitchen and sat down on a chair. "Daddy, what are you doing here? Who told you?" Her daughter looked at him with big eyes. "Evie, what did you and I agree on?" He looked sternly at his daughter. "Dad, it's the weekend. We can't relax, especially since Murphy and I made up a couple days ago." She looked at the young man. "That's right, with Murphy," he told her, then shifted his gaze to the young man. What the boy looked at the man. "And you, have you drawn conclusions for yourself?" he asked him, because he couldn't stand liars. "Yes," the man only replied. "So that in 15 minutes there's no one in this apartment, but you," the father shifted his gaze to his daughter, and you could tell he wasn't kidding. Evie realized that Daddy was no joke. She walked Murphy to the door, dressed and left. "And now you took a mop in your teeth and cleaned up everything here," said her father strictly. "Do not think that if I give you money and rent an apartment, I will always be so kind." Vincent was clearly angry with her, but there was nothing he could do. Evie promised him that everything would be done by morning, and he could even come and check it out. Vincent promised that he would definitely come. After that, he left, and Evie went into the room, sitting down on the DVJ. She couldn't. She was dizzy and drowsy, and she didn't know what to do now, because she was so excited because the place was such a mess, and she had to clean it up. But she didn't know how to do it in this state. After everything was done, she collapsed on the bed with no energy. She just didn't have the urge to even lift an arm or a leg. Then the girl closed her eyes. She decided to sleep for a while, but she didn't manage to do that, because not even a couple of hours passed when the door began to be banged on. Who else is there? She got out of bed, walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and there was Murphy, with numerous other friends. Hi, the jolly fellow waved at her. What do you want here? She opened the door, looked at Murphy. We're here to keep the party going, Murphy told her, as if nothing had happened. I don't need anyone here right now, so go ahead and come back Monday morning, she said, and wanted to close the door. If we're here, we'll stay here, he said. After that, the people who had come to see her entered the apartment and went into the kitchen. Murphy started mixing them some cocktails again. Everyone was drinking, having fun. There was music again. Evie was on a roll again. She didn't know what was happening to her, but she had to do something. Why didn't she recognize you at all? Murphy asked his friends. And she's never even seen us, they laughed. Her hands were dropping, her head too. The girl went over and told Max about it. After that, the young man took her to the bedroom. He put her on the bed, he himself lay down next to her. "Murphy, don't," she whispered. "Not really in the mood for lovemaking right now." "Relax," he mouthed to her, because he didn't want her to say or do anything right now. Murphy began to remove her dress. Evie moved, but very sluggishly. She was pushing Murphy away, but she wasn't putting much effort into it. So the guy made quick work of her. She felt really good. She rolled her eyes, but she didn't think much of it, realizing that the man she loved was with her now, so nothing would happen to her. After that, he brought her another cocktail. She drank it, and now her head was in a state of confusion. Everything was spinning. She was looking at the ceiling, and she didn't know if she was in the room or somewhere else. And then Murphy took her in his arms and carried her into the big room. There were a lot of Larrys there, all of them guys. Evie realized she wasn't in good shape, but she couldn't do anything about it. No arms, no legs, nothing moved. Murphy laid her down on the DVJ. Someone was saying something. Evie didn't understand anything at all. She just lay there, unable to move. "What are you looking at me for? Get on with it," Murphy said to one of his friends, and it was a whirlwind. Somebody picking Evie up, letting her back down. They were doing all sorts of things to her. And then she felt like she was lying on the floor. Her head still wouldn't go back into place. It was so bad she couldn't do anything about it. "Go check her out," Murphy said to one of the men present. Evie was lying on the floor, her whole body aching, like she'd been kicked or something. She tried to do something, but couldn't. She felt like she was no longer alive at all. Her eyes wouldn't open. She groaned. Someone bent over her. At that moment, Evie opened her eyes and was immediately hit in the face. "What are you doing?" Murphy asked him. She looked at me, he turned back to him, and Evie was done, gone into the darkness. She didn't understand anything, just lay on the floor and didn't move. Checked to see if she even has a pulse. One asked the other. They bent over the girl and felt for a pulse, but it was as if there was none. Everyone was scared, so they decided to just run away from the apartment. But Murphy knew if they just ran away, it would be bad for them. "Okay guys, let's get the rug and wrap her in it," he told them, because he didn't see any other way out, only this way. Quickly, several pairs of men's hands grabbed the rug, rolled Evie into it. After that, they carried her outside. "Where are we taking him?" The man looked at Murphy. "Let's go to the neighbor's yard, throw it in the trash, and that's it. Just walk away," he said. That's what everyone did. After they did, and they were a safe distance from the dump, Murphy told everyone that he'd put drugs in Evie's cocktail, and not a few. What if they notice? The others were afraid, because they were here too. Well, they'll notice and notice she was like that, maybe she did something somewhere. My father personally kicked me out of that apartment, and he knew I wouldn't come while he was there, he laughed, because he thought he had fooled everyone. Well, we're here, the other young man told him. So what, they came, and then they went. Murphy seemed indifferent to what they had done. After that, they went to some pub, sat down, and started drinking. The guys just didn't think about anything, neither about Evie, nor about the rug, nor about the dump where they had left the rug. But it was time to go home, so the friends split up. They told Murphy before they left that if anyone asked them anything, they had nothing to do with it. It was all him. He agreed, for he didn't care what anyone thought. He was really sure that nobody would be looking for Evie except her father, and he didn't care about that now. And who would find her on that dump? A car would come in the morning, they would take out the garbage, and there, on the big dump, nobody would need her. He came home quietly. It was very late, he went to bed and forgot about what had happened today. But in the morning he got up, his head hurt a lot. He did not think about anything, only about where to get a new dose to take it. Evie woke up, she couldn't do anything. Her head was still spinning. She realized she was either bound or something else. Her head hurt so bad she just couldn't do anything. There was also that nasty smell in the darkness. Where she was, she didn't realize. She started moaning because she didn't have the strength to scream anymore. Her whole body ached so much that she just couldn't do anything about it. Then she felt someone canting her, as if she had been pulled from somewhere and carried. "Wait, man, I think there's someone in the carpet," she heard a voice from outside. After that, the girl realized that she was in the carpet. Who will be there? Look at the normal carpet, we'll go and make a bed there. We'll be fine, said the other one to him. They walked on, then shook Evie's head even more. Okay, quiet everybody, listen, said one of the men. Everyone quieted down and listened, but there were no sounds. What are we supposed to hear? Someone in the crowd asked. Quiet, I can't make out what we need to hear. Just let's all be quiet together, and maybe we'll hear something, the same rattling voice said. Everyone was silent and listened, but nothing was heard. Then they decided to put the rug on the ground and think. What, do you think this carpet would look good in the basement? Someone asked about it, and the others began to clamor. Evie didn't understand anything at all. She felt so bad, she thought she was dying. In the cellar, everything that you don't bring will look good, answered the other, because he knew what was going on down there. It was good that they were allowed into the house, because the janitor was kind, otherwise they would have had to wander around. But the men rested and got ready to go on. The three of them picked up the rug, threw it on their shoulders, and were ready to go when there was another groan. There, you heard, said the same senile voice, even having to repeat it more than once. We heard, but what is it? The one who kept asking didn't understand. How do I know what it is? I think it's from the carpet, he said quietly. You're hallucinating already, VJ the other told him. What hallucinations? Listen, Evie heard him say, and when he said, listen, she moaned again. She couldn't speak, so she had to moan. This rug was squeezing her so hard on all sides that she just couldn't do anything else. The girl moaned some more, and then some more. It wasn't until the rug was placed on the ground again that she realized it was about to be unrolled. She had to coordinate the movement so that she wouldn't get dizzy or worse. Help Evie spoke softly so that the others would realize that there was a person here. They began to unroll the carpet altogether. There were 4 of them, and they were very careful. The carpet was very large, but they managed. Now that they had unrolled it completely, they saw that it was a woman or a girl. It was hard to make out. Look at her, said one of the men who had just told VJ he was glitching. We need to get her to the hospital right away, said another. They began to tell the few passers-by that the girl was ill and needed to go to the hospital, but they all shied away from them. Then, it was decided to carry her to the basement with the rug. Somehow they lifted her up and carried her. She didn't look very big, but she weighed a lot. When they reached the cellar, they were all tired. But there was not much left, and then the men took her by the arms and legs and carried her down into the cellar, laid her on the same rug where she had been lying, and began to examine her. Look at her, she's all torn up, said the same VJ who was examining the girl's body. And what to do? You can't do without a hospital. Anyway, the doctors have to examine her, said someone else. They did not know what to do, how to be. Then VJ stood up, he raised his index finger up, as if he had thought of something. He left the basement and went to the janitor's office. He wanted her to call an ambulance, but when he got to her, it turned out she wasn't home. It was unknown where to look for her. Then the homeless people decided that they could deal with the problem themselves. They started looking for something to sanitize their wounds. They had only 3 bottles of alcohol left, which they had left for tonight. They had to sacrifice them. Here, take these, one of the men handed them the caskets. Nothing was too small for them now. They took some dirty rags and began to shake them off. Then to clean Evie's wounds. She was moaning, delirious. Someone took her temperature. Just a hand touching her forehead. It was learned that she probably had one, but we still had to wait until morning. In the morning, VJ ran to the janitor again. He finally got her to call an ambulance. The woman did as he told her. She was also frightened, but did nothing. And now they waited together for the ambulance. When the paramedics arrived, they examined those who had rescued the girl, smirked, but did not refuse them, because they had taken the Hippocratic oath to help anyone. The paramedics saw that the girl looked normal, picked her up, placed her on a stretcher, carried them into the ambulance. The lights came on and the girl was taken to the hospital. She was no longer delirious, but seemed to be in the other world. The doctors examined the body of the young girl once again in the car, realized that the girl had been beaten and also raped, but none of them would do anything now. It was necessary to put her in a state of stability first. When they arrived at the hospital, Evie was placed in one of the rooms. The doctors immediately rushed there, and when they started to find out everything, it turned out to be the daughter of the local judge. "Oh girl, who did this to you?" someone said above her. Evie heard some words, but she couldn't make anything out. She was put under anesthesia so that she could not feel anything. Something had to be stitched, something had to be repaired. The doctors were fighting for her life, and also for her blood, for she was unknown where, unknown with whom. Immediately the suspicion fell on those very homeless, that they most likely found a drunken girl somewhere, and abused her, and then called an ambulance. And now they were afraid and hiding in their basement. But no one cared about that yet. Now it was necessary to find my father and tell him everything, and then let him take any measures against these bastards. Evie lay under the drips. She couldn't regain consciousness for a long time. She kept babbling and saying something. When her father arrived and sat down beside her bed, he just put his face in his palms and cried bitterly. "My daughter, who did this to you? You only tell me the name. I will immediately this man into several pieces." He sat beside the bed and told her. But Evie couldn't tell him anything yet, because she was in no condition to do so. Vincent went out into the corridor, met the doctor, and asked him how his daughter was doing. He told him everything. The father felt incredibly sorry for his daughter, imagining at once what those bandits might have done to her, and how they had dealt with her. But now, while nothing could be done, because he did not know for sure, these bums, not these bums. But just in case, he sent the guys who had arrested these scoundrels, and now they were all on their way to the jail. "Tell me, where did you meet this girl?" The investigator, who had been appointed in charge of the case, asked them. "We didn't meet her anywhere. We just found a rug in a garbage dump," they said, hiding nothing. "So what? The rug's in the dumpster. And there was a girl in it?" He didn't understand. Yes, it was like that, they told him. "Well, what happened next? Why didn't you call an ambulance?" The law asked them. "Yes, we called her, or rather we wanted to call her. But no matter who we approached, they shied away from us, as if we were contagious," said one of the four. "Okay, and then how did you get called in?" The investigator was just curious. "In the morning I went to the janitor, and she called an ambulance," said VJ, who went to her both morning and evening. "Okay, what was with the girl when you found her?" The interrogation continued. "She was all torn up, and we didn't even spare our last cup and rubbed all her wounds with alcohol to disinfect them," said another man. "So I understand you," said the man in shoulder straps. He looked at his comrade, and then began to write down something. The homeless people sat there, looking at each other, not knowing what to do now, but they had to tell everything. "This is the first time I've seen such decent bums," the uniformed man told them. "Well, take a good look and remember," VJ laughed. He was just shocked that today really hadn't worked out that way. The girl they had found was unconscious, and no one knew what would happen to her next. The whole time they were sitting in the ward, the doctors were fighting for Evie's life. It was when she regained consciousness that everyone quickly ran up to her with papers. They had to take statements and ask who the scoundrels were that had done such a thing. Evie spoke a little, but she told them everything honestly, about Murphy and his friends, but she had very little strength and she fell back into unconsciousness. "Get away from her," Vincent said. He'd been calling his ex-wife Larry for the past hour, but she wouldn't pick up the phone. Vincent couldn't understand how a mother who'd lived with this girl for so long could be so disinterested in her daughter. But now he was seeing it for what it was, and there was nothing he could do differently. Vincent had taken some time off work, taking care of the girl because it was important to him that she survive. And now he knew for sure that she would, because she'd come to several times, giving some kind of testimony, talking. Dad couldn't understand how this could have happened at all. Murphy, who had promised him that he would be decent, that he would do everything and not do anything, had arranged this. Or maybe he'd set it all up because of him. Vincent stopped and stared at one point. Then he started thinking about it. Well, that wasn't the point, so Vincent pushed those thoughts aside and walked over to his daughter again. "Evie, my love, I realize now how wrong I was. Perhaps when you came from your mother, you needed support, warmth and care, and do you want a separate apartment, of course, well on, please." He was talking to himself because the girl was unconscious again. She was lying on the bed and he was sitting beside her, Vincent knew she was beside him and could hear him. As he sat by his daughter's bed, he promised himself and her that he would get his revenge and he wouldn't let it go. He didn't know if Evie had hurt him or not, but he knew that once she recovered, no lawyer would save that scum from punishment. Vincent knew exactly what he would do, what he would say, and how he would punish the man who had done this to his daughter. Now we had to wait for Evie to come to her senses so she could testify. I didn't really want to try innocent people. And so, a few weeks passed, the girl finally came to her senses. She just lay in the hospital. Vincent asked her every day about things, about the situation, about everything. Evie told him, but often averted her eyes, ashamed of her father, that it was mostly her own fault. If she hadn't gotten involved with Murphy, if she hadn't let him into the apartment, none of this would have happened. Her father would reassure his daughter he would tell her it wasn't her fault, to not blame herself. But Evie lay there, she was crying and laughing. Vincent thought at first that she had something wrong with her head. "Honey, calm down and know that your father is the best in the world," he kissed her. Now, after everything that had happened to the girl, he just couldn't leave it like this, without a solution. After taking his daughter home, he had already decided exactly what he was going to do, and how to punish the scumbags who had done all this to his little girl. The first thing he did was find Murphy, who was the instigator of it all. When Murphy saw Vincent, he wondered why he'd found him, since he hadn't done anything. But Vincent didn't want to hear it, because he knew exactly who had started it and why it had been done. "Well, weren't you waiting for me?" Vincent asked him. "No, why?" The boy didn't understand. Murphy was very surprised. But when Vincent began to tell him about Evie, he was even more surprised because the boy thought the girl had rotted in a dumpster long ago, and her body had never been found. "What, I can tell from your eyes you're surprised?" Vincent asked him. "No, I don't know anything at all," Murphy answered him. "I can see in your eyes how you don't know anything." The man was very upset that even though Murphy was playing the game, he was doing it very poorly. Vincent pressed charges against Murphy. Of course, it wasn't real now, because the investigators would be coming. But he was afraid Murphy would see Evie, and then he'd be off somewhere else. So it had to be done here and now. "So you come with me and turn in your accomplice." As he twisted his hands behind him and led him behind him so he couldn't do anything. "What are you doing?" "It's not my fault." "You hear me? It's not my fault," Murphy screamed. "It's up to the police to decide whether you're guilty or not." Vincent pushed him ahead of him. Murphy didn't resist. He walked ahead of the man, stumbling over every bump, but still moving forward. It wasn't very pleasant, but there was nothing left to do. Vincent rubbed his hands together because he'd caught one of the bastards. Now he had to find the others, but how could he do that if this thing wouldn't talk? But he knew the police wouldn't let anything go to waste, and Murphy would definitely start talking. Murphy was taken to the police station. Vincent didn't know what else to do with him. He left him there and sternly ordered the policemen not to let him go. They just shrugged their shoulders. Of course they wouldn't let him go, but how to get information out of him about the others who were with him? "It's okay. Shake it a little. It'll tell you everything," Vincent told them. The interrogations began, and they didn't end until the evening. Vincent knew he couldn't get much out of Murphy, but he also knew that the guy knew a lot. Not just about information, but about Larry. And right now, he could make the cops' ears pop. So Vincent decided to go blackmail. He goes to the police station. "You know, and I know what this guy's been up to," I said deliberately, so the guy could hear it all. Then turned to Murphy, looking at him. He sat there, staring unblinking. "Go ahead," he shrugged. "Why are you looking at me like that? I tell you. The drug you were distributing was found in my daughter's blood. Not that you didn't add it to her," Vincent asked him. "Why are you doing this? I promised you I wouldn't do it anymore," Murphy said, sitting back in his chair, his hands clasped behind his back, almost crying. "You also promised me that you would cherish and nurture my daughter, my little girl," Vincent told him back, almost crying himself. "All right, and I'll tell you," Murphy said. And he looked at everyone sitting here, silent at first, but then he got ready to speak. The guy realized that if Vincent opened his mouth now, he'd just get added time on top of everything else. "Yeah, we went to Evie's party, and I was really pissed that she'd talked to her father, that she'd told him the whole story about me. and I wanted to get back at her somehow. So when she'd had a few drinks, one of them was filled with, he paused, and then he said what he'd put in it. There you are. Vincent banged his fist on the table. He couldn't listen to this scoundrel's confessions. That's all, and then it was just a matter of time. She blacked out, then she passed out. We thought she was dead when we wrapped her in the carpet, Murphy admitted. I see. Names, surnames, patronymics the girl's father demanded of him. Murphy told everything. He didn't hide anything. And within 3 days everyone was brought here to the police station. Vincent stared at these men, and Evie wouldn't even stand next to them, let alone lie down. He looked at one, the other, the third, with contempt, realizing what scum they were and what they'd done, but he was powerless now. If he started doing something of his own, he wouldn't be forgiven, but his time would come. The cops were interrogating. There was a lot to ask, a lot to do. The men were locked up in a holding cell. They gave testimony. Most of it was true. And who would have thought that the father worked as chief magistrate? Because Evie had said her dad worked in a court somewhere. No big deal. And it turned out to be. Murphy couldn't understand how it could happen that this girl's father was a judge in this town. But it was all done now, so it was too late to make a fist. Evie had finally come to her senses. She lived with her father, became very modest, did not go anywhere all the time, saying that she did not like anything. Everything did not matter. Her father forced her to go out to do something, but she didn't want to do anything at all. Daughter, will you come with me to the trial? Do you want to see how these freaks are executed? He asked her. Dad, please don't make me do more than I can do, she asked him. Yes, of course, darling, whatever you say, he told her. And that's all. After that, the men were convicted, all given different sentences because everyone was guilty. Some did one thing, some did another, but they were all guilty of not providing first aid to a dying man. No one argued with that, so they just stood in the cage with their heads down. Murphy looked up for a moment, looking at Evie, and she was looking at him at the same time. Dad, how could he do that? Evie asked her father later. I can't tell you anything. He's just a scoundrel, a man who doesn't appreciate the feelings of others. And he doesn't care at all what the people he talks to think, which is also proved by the fact that he sold these illegal substances to children who then died. Not all of them, of course, but probably many, he said. Yes, and the truth always triumphs, Evie agreed with him. Yes, it had to end, and it did. And I think it was the logical end to the whole story. The father hugged his daughter. Dad, if it hadn't been for you, imagine what they would have done to me. They were sitting at home when Vincent's phone rang. He looked at the display and Larry's name came up. Ah, come to think of it, he said, and showed his daughter's cell phone. Don't take it, she asked, because like her father, she didn't want to socialize with this woman. Okay, whatever you say. Vincent dropped the call. After that, the daughter and her father started living together. No more rented apartments, nothing that could affect the girl's life. Dad, don't we ever thank those homeless people who helped me? Evie asked one day, because she remembered what they had said and done, and she felt sorry for them. Look, I've thought about it before too, but I didn't know what to do, he told her. Let me find them and bring them to you, she mumbled. Okay, look for me. Bring me. I'm waiting for you, Vincent said, and smiled at his daughter. Evie stepped outside. She looked around. She needed to find the 4 men who had rescued her, but she had no idea where to find them. She was in some kind of basement, but she didn't know which one either. Then she began to remember what they said and thought that they could not carry her far, so she went to the yards that were near her house. She found a janitor in one of the yards and asked her if she had called an ambulance. Excuse me, can I ask you a question? She approached the woman. Of course, the woman looked at her. Do you happen to know 4 homeless people? Evie asked the woman. I used to know them, but they haven't lived here for a long time. She pointed to the basement. What was very surprising was that this house was practically next door to her house, meaning that those who had killed her, or thought they had killed her, had just carried her out in a palace a few meters away from her own house. Evie was flabbergasted. She was both amused and wanted to cry, but she did neither of those things, just asked where to find the 4 men who had helped her survive. "Oh baby, these are such good people. They have always helped me in everything, and I, while no one knew, helped them too," the woman told her. "So you know where to find them?" Evie asked. "Now I don't know where they are, but she pointed to the basement and said they were sometimes there in the evening." "Thank you so much," Evie shook her hand. "Oh girl, weren't you saved by those four? I called an ambulance then." "It was you," the woman looked at her point blank. "Yes, that was me, and now I want to find these men and do something good for them," the girl admitted to her. "And you leave me your cell phone number. As soon as they get here, I'll call you right away," the woman said. "That's a great idea." Evie didn't think of that right away. She wrote her numbers in the notebook the woman carried with her at all times, said her goodbyes, and left. When the girl came home, she told her father everything. He was surprised how his daughter, unconscious, delirious, but still remembered something. He praised her, and they sat down to dinner. "Daddy, you know what I realized. Even if you are a homeless man, and you live somewhere in the basement, there can still be something human in you." The daughter looked at the man. Yes, he nodded his head and said nothing more. "Why are you so pensive?" Evie asked him, because she wondered why her father was usually so talkative, but tonight he was silent all evening. "Your mother called," he told her in just a few words. "And what, did you answer her?" she asked. "Yeah, and you know what she told me?" Vincent continued to stare at the girl. Of course not. She didn't understand why she had to pull this information out of her father now. That she'd been sick all this time. She was sick. And she was in the hospital, my father said, at which point he was digging into his plate with his fork. "And you believed her?" Evie raised her big eyes to him. "I don't know," he shrugged. They didn't talk about anything else that evening. Evie went to her room, lay down on her bed, covered her head with a blanket, and began to remember how things were in their family. Here was a young and happy mom who was always telling her something, taking her in her arms. And here's Dad, he's just as young and smiling all the time. What happened? Why did everything happen like this? Why did she become like this herself? The girl cried. Now she wanted so much to call her mom and tell her everything, but she never decided to do it. The girl decided that if she called, she would do it not today, but tomorrow. After that, she closed her eyes and tried to sleep. During the night, she dreamed of different things, mom and dad, some friends, something else. She tossed around the bed, couldn't calm down for a long time, but eventually she fell asleep, and she doesn't know what happened next. In the morning, when Evie woke up, she saw the missed call light on her phone. The number was unfamiliar, and so she immediately thought of the janitor Thea, with whom she had recently spoken. What if those men had gone to their basement again? She saw them, and decided to dial Evie. She called back the unfamiliar number, and a woman's voice answered. "Hello," she heard. "Hello, you called me," Evie said, listening to see who it could be. "Hello, this is Murphy's mother," the woman mumbled. "What? Why are you calling me?" Evie didn't understand. "I just wanted to apologize for my son. He's always been mean to the girls, and what they did to you is out of line." Evie could hear the woman crying. "You're not upset. Everything's fine. At least for me," she told her, and she didn't feel like talking anymore. Evie had recovered in her studies. Now she had to practically retake the same course she had left behind and hadn't studied for a long time. It had been about 8 months or so, and her phone rang again. Evie hesitated to pick it up for a long time, because the number was unfamiliar again, but she couldn't miss the call from Thea. "Hello," the girl said. "Evie, hi, it's me, Thea. Remember me? I'm the janitor from the house where you were looking for the bums," she said. "Yes, of course, hello. I've been waiting for your call for so long, and you haven't called. I thought maybe you lost your notebook or something else happened," she said quickly, because she was afraid that Thea would just hang up. "So yesterday I heard that VJ and his friends were in the basement again. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then when I went downstairs I saw that they were really there. I wanted to tell them about you, that you've recovered, you've been discharged from the hospital, and now you're looking for them to thank you." Thea spoke as fast as Evie did. She didn't know what she was afraid of, but it didn't matter to Evie now. She listened to Thea, wondering how to get this information to her father and where to find the homeless people. She asked Thea if she had talked to them. No, I didn't get a chance to talk because I was afraid they'd get scared and leave, the woman told her. Well, do you know when they might still be there? The girl asked. Evie, you know I've followed them, and I know where they're dwelling now, Thea admitted to the girl. So where do they live now? Evie wondered. They had gone quite far away, but in order not to be terrorized and not to be found, moved into the basement 2 blocks away from this house. Where they found you, said the woman. Wow, can you show me? Evie was so happy to have found her saviors that she didn't think about anything else. Thea, of course, agreed to show her where her saviors now resided, and they agreed to meet. You know, I can't do it now, but in 2 days I'll come to you and we'll go together to where these people are, Evie said, and hung up the phone. After talking to the woman, Evie went to the kitchen where her father was drinking coffee. He was going to work. How are you doing? He asked her. I'm doing great. How are you doing? She kissed her father on the cheek. I'm doing fine too, he told her and looked at her and smiled, seeing that his daughter was happy. Oh, Daddy, I just got a call from that janitor from the yard where those bums found me, and she told me that she saw them again. Not only that, when they went out this morning, she followed them, and now, when I have free time, I will go to them, and we will find them, she told her father. That's great news. I don't know how we're going to thank them, but I don't think they're going to charge us. What else do they want? Ivy smiled. She didn't say anything, and now she was thinking only about how she could finish all her business and go to Tamara Egorovna's meeting. Everything was fine. The term paper was written. Exams were passed. And now the girl is going to the very yard where she was found in the carpet. She arrived, but the janitor was nowhere to be found. Of course, it was sad, but she was not going to go anywhere. Sat down on a bench and waited for her. She had enough time, so she could sit. Thea didn't show up until 2.5 hours later. When she first saw Evie from afar, she immediately gasped and remembered that they had agreed to meet, but what day they hadn't agreed on. And now Thea wanted to talk to the girl. Hello, my dear. She came up to her. Thea, where did you go? Evie asked her. Yeah, where I went. It's not there anymore, she told her, waved it off and laughed. Well, it's understandable that you're not there anymore, Evie laughed too. Thea took a seat next to the girl and began to tell her how she had heard that men were coming to this basement again. Tell me, Thea, how can we thank them? Will they take money from us or something else? The girl wondered. Oh, Evie, I'm going to tell you all about it now, the woman told her. She sat next to the girl like that, folded her hands in her lap, and began to broadcast. Intrigued, Evie looked at her. You realize that if they are homeless, they have nothing. One of them told me that he had lost his memory. The second one, when he got a job, they took away his passport. He ran away, and without a passport, they don't hire him anywhere. Well, of course, you can make one, but you have to go to so much trouble. So they all live without a passport, without memory, the janitor told her. Okay, we'll make passports for them, but that's a small fraction of what we can do, the girl said. Yeah, passports are a small part of it. I don't know. Offer them money or something, Thea thought. She wasn't a rich woman herself, but what she was doing was fine with her. So you promised me you'd show me where the 4 of them live now, Evie asked her. Yes, of course, we'll go with you now. I'll just get changed. She went into the entrance, went into her den, stayed there for a short while, and went back out to Evie. Wow. She saw that Thea was wearing some kind of coat, even though it was old, but it suited her face. She was also wearing boots that she must have found in a dumpster, and she was carrying a purse. Evie checked out the outfit, and they walked down the sidewalk a couple of blocks to the house where Thea thought the men who had once helped Evie now lived. And they were indeed in that house, just as Thea had told them. As soon as they saw Evie, they immediately went somewhere. Wait, Evie shouted to them. What do you want? They stood there like stumbling blocks. You're a sight for sore eyes, she told them as she approached. We don't know anything, we didn't do anything. We're not guilty of anything, they began to say in order. Yes, I know you didn't do anything. I'm looking for you to thank you, the girl told them. We don't need anything. We have everything, said one of them suddenly. I know you don't need anything, but can I make you some papers? She asked. Papers, they looked at each other. You. Yes, she nodded. Of course you can. Why can you do it? The men were immediately animated. First, let's get acquainted. My name is Evie, but I think you already know that. What's yours? She looked at them. She wanted to know which one of them was VJ. I'm Freedy. The man she wanted to recognize immediately introduced himself. Okay, who are you? She looked at the next one. And I'm Aiden, the man said. He was very embarrassed. Okay, Aiden. Who are you? She looked at the next one. I'm Max, he said, and chuckled, probably not knowing why he did it. What's so funny? Evie didn't understand she was serious in front of them, and they were making fun of her. He doesn't remember his name or where he's from or who he is, VJ told her then. All right, well, what about you? She looked at the last one. And me, Pete, he told her. I see you're all such intellectuals. How did you get here? She said. You know, things happen in life. We're homeless right now, and we don't even know how we met. We just started living together, and we just kind of grew attached to each other, VJ told her. Promise me that you will not go anywhere from here. I'll go home now, tell my father, and then he'll find you and do what he can, the girl told them. Promise? Thea looked at them. We promise, they said, and looked at each other again. Okay, I believe them. Let's just make a deal. You don't go anywhere. I tell everything to my father. He makes your papers. And only after that you and I may or may not part. Or we may or may not stay friends, Evie told them. Good, they replied. After that, she actually went home, waited until the evening when her father came home from work, and told him everything right away. Her father was very flattered by the work his daughter had done. He praised her, thanked her, and now there was only one thing to do: meet with them, and do everything they asked. Vincent was a man of his word, and if he wanted to help these people, he meant to do it. Now he was going to find out if he could restore the documents to the very homeless men who had saved his daughter from certain death. It turned out that it wasn't that hard to do. And if they were smarter, they could do it themselves, and long ago would have been with the documents. As soon as the man found out everything, he immediately went to the address that his daughter had given him. Hello, fellow homeless, he greeted the four men who were sitting near the entrance on a bench while no one was there. Greetings. And who are you? They asked the man. I'm the same father you've already seen, he winked at them. Oh, that's right, Judge said VJ, and smiled with a toothless mouth. Tell me, how long have you been in this position? He asked them. Whoever VJ spoke for everyone. I see. So you're the smartest? Vincent asked him. It works out that way, he nodded. So are we going to restore your documents, your memory, your family ties? The man in the beige coat looked at them. Yeah, Max nodded at him, looking at Vincent like he was some kind of celestial. That's it. I need accurate data. And I'll do everything in the shortest possible time. He took out a notebook and started writing something down. Everyone except Max dictated everything to him. And he doesn't remember much, how he came, where he went. We took him into the company out of pity, Pyotr Fedorovich said. I'm clear, wait here, or will you come with me? And I'll get you a hostel, and you can stay there for a while? Vincent asked. If I may, VJ said quietly. He could already see that no harm would come to them from these Larrys. Of course you can. Vincent looked around at the men. Yes, they weren't very clean, or rather quite dirty, but he sighed and opened the car door. As soon as everyone got in there, the cabin immediately smelled like something other than the Christmas tree that had been hanging there. Vincent opened the windows, held his breath as long as he could, and they drove off. Not half an hour later, they were all there. Vincent stared at the back seat, thinking he was going straight to the car wash. Thank you, the men thanked him tirelessly as they received their room keys. Yes, they had been put in one, but the girl at the front desk didn't want to do that either. Do you realize we'll have to burn this hostel down? She said to Vincent, but when he offered to pay quadruple, according to the number of guests, she didn't argue with him. That's it, I'm off. Expect me in the next few days, he told the men, and walked out of there. He went straight to work. There was a lot to settle, and that matter with the bums. Vincent found out that VJ's relatives had been looking for him for a long time, and so had Pete's, and it wasn't clear what was wrong with the two of them. "I'll take care of it," he said, and looked at the assistant prosecutor who was helping him with all the questions. She was a charming young woman who drove Vincent crazy. And indeed, the man figured it all out. Before making the documents, he contacted the relatives of all the men they were looking for, gave their names, and sent a photo. A few days later, they were here at his place. And when he arranged a meeting, the relatives couldn't be happy. As promised, Vincent made all the documents they needed. "I was wondering, you didn't lose your memory. Why didn't you come home?" he asked VJ. "And how could I have come empty-handed? And then I thought that my wife had forgotten me," he hugged the woman. "You guys," Vincent shook his head. Now it was just a matter of finding Aiden's relatives, but that was the hardest thing to do. He couldn't remember his last name, but the photo he'd been given had helped his relatives find him. Max, on the other hand, was the hardest. Not only did he not remember his last name, but his name was fictitious. "What am I supposed to do with you?" Vincent looked at him. "I don't know." After what happened to him, his face was also a bit deformed, so no one recognized him from the picture either. "Vincent, can I ask you a question?" Somehow they met again, and now Thea was with them. "Of course, why do you ask?" He looked at her. Actually, she was the one who made sure the ambulance came. "Is there somewhere to put Max and me alone?" She was embarrassed. "Of course. And you won't drink?" Vincent wagged his finger. No, they made big eyes. "So where do you live now?" He wanted to go somewhere else, but he stopped. "I have, but nobody knows about it. They allocated me a utility room in the entrance." "That's where we live," Thea said. "It's clear to me. If I buy you a room in a communal apartment, is that enough?" Vincent asked them. Of course not. She wanted to hug Vincent, but didn't dare. Everyone had their papers in their rooms now. Evie wept when she heard what her father had done. At that moment, her phone rang. Evie looked at the screen. It was her mom, and she couldn't help but answer it at a time like this. "Hello," the girl said. "Daughter, hi, I'm so sorry," Larry sobbed into the phone. "Mommy, I love you so much. Can I come visit you on vacation?" Evie asked her, and looked at her father. Of course, Mom was still crying. Evie pressed the reset button. She realized now what she had done in her life. She wanted so badly to make things right, and she had plenty of time to do it.